Hagmann report for today. It is Monday, December 29th, 2014. What, just another mere 48 plus or minus a few hours to 2015, depending on which time zone you're listening. I'm Doug Hagmann. I'm the co-host along with my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Report. Folks, you're about to hear an incredible 3-hour program, unbiased, uncensored news, information, and analysis. In this case, more analysis in the run-up to World War III. You're going to be hearing certain things tonight. For example, as the program unfolds, phrases perhaps you have not heard before. How about Phase Zero shaping? Pilot program for the Phase Zero shaping. Human terrain teams. And, of course, Asia Pivot. You're going to be hearing things about the Tavistock branch, the U.S. branch of the Tavistock Institute, the RAND Corporation. You're going to hear stuff about Seth Rogen and Franco and the Sony hack, and you're going to hear a lot of information tonight. So grab, if you are in a position to do so, get by a computer or grab a pen and paper and be ready, because Nathan's going to be joining us at the bottom of the first hour. Nathan Leal, that is, from the Watchman's Cry. And of course, the Watchman's Cry, his website is linked off of our website, which is hagmanandhagman.com. That's hagmanandhagman.com. And you'll be able to follow along very nicely. Both John and I spoke to Nathan earlier today a couple of times. And we've been speaking with him on a regular basis pertaining to his research, his investigation into various aspects of things that are really right out in the open. And some aren't. But you're going to be surprised at what is being planned for us for 2015 and beyond, folks. So I got to tell you, just make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full upright and locked position, and buckle up, because 2015, well, at least it's going to start, we believe, a pivot point for different things to be taking place throughout the year. Folks, you're listening to the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D, and we've got the glasses to prove it, or the 3D headsets to prove it. We look well beyond the headlines and bylines and bring you the news behind the news. Look through the fog of disinformation, and that's all it is out there right now. It seems like it's all disinformation, misinformation, misdirection. It's upside down. The entertainment industry appears to be providing the news, at least in terms of plans, plots, and schemes, while the news, well, they're merely providing entertainment. For new listeners, I want to say hello to the many new listeners who checked in with us here over the weekend. Too numerous to mention. I just want to say hello to one person listening in Italy, Gianluca Marotti. As a matter of fact, a public figure, endorsed Signs in the Heavens and on the Earth, that book written by Doug Krieger. Thank you for tuning us in this evening or this morning, or whatever the case might be. Thank you for joining us. Again, we broadcast live each and every weeknight, Monday through Friday, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, the only day that we will have off this week to spend with our family is going to be on New Year's Eve. We're going to be here for the first day of 2015 on January 1st, hitting it hard. And as a matter of fact, you'll notice some changes, I believe, beginning with the first. Good changes. Now, you can find us on the internet, again, at hagmanandhagman.com. You have to spell it all out, including the word and. It's hagmanandhagman.com. We have some additional information up there now. Hopefully, in the next 48 hours, we'll have the past shows updated in terms of the show summaries. Now, if you don't want to wait for that and you want to go directly to our past shows, you can do so. Click on any article on our website, and on the right-hand side of the page, of the article page, you'll see something that looks like it's like an orange box. It says RSS feed. Click on that, and that'll take you to a page at BTR. You can scroll down that page all the way for a long time. A lot of our shows are on there. Most of them, as a matter of fact. Thank you for deliberately tuning into us tonight. Thank you for your belief and your trust in us as we walk through this minefield of current events together. A couple of announcements before I bring him on. Next Wednesday, which will be the 7th, Steve Quayle and Tom Horn will be joining us. That's on the 7th, Steve Quayle and Tom Horn. And then on Monday the 12th, Pastor David Langford and Steve Quayle. And there's something, folks, that I'm going to be putting up on our website. It's going to, the 31st is going to be a very special day of prayer and fasting. But the entire month of January, Pastor Langford has asked, because of what appears to be certain really critical events taking place in the year 2015, perhaps we can change or at least mitigate some of the collateral damage from what will be taking place through prayer. And our spiritual advisor, spiritual leader for the Hagmann and Hagmann Report is Pastor David Langford, the voice of evangelism. And, of course, his website, it's right, it's on our front page there. You can just scroll down, and in fact, it's one of the top links on our website. And if you go to HagmannandHagmann.com, there's a link. I'd like to call out two particular articles or stories or links to videos. The first one is a link, 15-minute video, very well worth the time. It's done by a man by the name of Jason. Puts together some Illuminati references, a compilation of Illuminati. Jason A. That's right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And Joe, yeah, welcome tonight. And the second one, of course, is our appearance on InfoWars, Alex Jones. That was on the 26th. But we have a link directly to, right, exactly. We've got a link directly to the video there. And I think our appearance comes in about an hour in. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which video that is, but I'm fairly certain that that's on his. Well, that's definitely Alex's channel.
1 hour and 3 minutes into the show, I believe we came on, and we stayed for about an hour and a half. So it would probably be about 63 minutes in, and from there, it was a good show. We talked about a lot of things, covered a lot of ground, a lot of topics, from the economy to 2015 to the racial tensions that are trying to be brought back into the public with some of these demonstrations, shootings, and the media flaming the fire.
Exactly. And we're still working on a couple of things here, very critical stories or articles or reports, investigative reports, ladies and gentlemen, that I believe are going to be of extreme significance. One has to do with the Sony hack. It was interesting that and I was asking Joe before the show because we had talked about the Sony hack, and of course I believe based on everything I've been able to tell, that the CIA, in this case rogue elements of the CIA, which would include at least in my research, John Brennan, have got their fingerprints all over this. Now the of course the blame, the New York Times was the first out, I think, to blame North Korea, at least dragging the movie, the interview, into this. That to me was kind of a sideshow. The initial hack had a lot to do with something much different, much more nefarious, and that the movie was just an exploitation of the hack, but now the fingers are being pointed at Russia. And ladies and gentlemen, we are at severe odds with Russia today. We are very, very, we are really engaged in cold war with Russia, and it's warming up quickly. But now you'll see some finger pointing at Russia, of course, and that's very interesting. And of course, we lost. There's another plane that went missing this weekend. Did you see that?
I saw it. I turned on Fox News for a few minutes today just to see if there was anything important or a big story that they were getting into. And on the across the bottom, something about AirAsia, a flight from Indonesia, I believe. And from what I could tell, they had a search party going, but they once it got dark, they stopped the search, which is indicated to me that they obviously have not found the plane.
Well, it's claimed to be at the bottom of the sea right now. What we're referring to,
they should find the what was it, 317 or MH17 before they start looking for this one, unless there's a potential for survivors.
Well, yeah, I'm not so sure. It wouldn't appear to me that if the event took place the way they said it did, there wouldn't be any survivors. Of course, we're talking about flight 8501, AirAsia flight 8501, and it was traveling. It departed Indonesia at 5:35 Sunday morning. Radar, well, it suddenly vanished from radar at 6:18. So that's, what would that be, 43 minutes into the flight. Now, I would suspect that it's important to pay attention to these numbers. And, well, it was scheduled to arrive in Singapore 8:30 in the morning, that morning. 162 people aboard, 155 plus 7 crew. Now, once again, the flight went missing on Sunday morning at 6:18 local time. It was 6 minutes after the last communication with air traffic control while traveling from Indonesia to Singapore. 162 souls. Bang, it vanished. Now, we know that there were reportedly in the area some pretty bad thunderstorms and some bad weather. Well, the search planes spotted objects in 2 oily patches in the sea area Monday afternoon, their time. So we're talking perhaps, 12, 14 hours ago. Now, it's interesting to me that we've had 3 incidents with respect to these aircraft from this area of the world. You've got, the Malaysian aircraft and now AirAsia. It's interesting, and it's interesting that they haven't found. Of course, that one disappeared. The one was shot down over Ukraine, and then of course this one missing, totally missing between Indonesia and Singapore. That part of the world seems to have some issues. Really. It's interesting because, just to give you a quick timeline, I think this is pretty important here. Scheduled to take off at 5:35. It did take off at 5:36. At 6:12, contact with Jakarta ACC, Air Traffic Control. The flight requested to climb above the storms, allegedly. Of course, that request was denied. And I've read and researched this, and I've talked to a couple of different people knowledgeable about aircraft, and that's not something you should do, is attempt to fly above the storms. But
Yeah, they were trying to. Was that the last communication? They asked how to, or they were told they could fly left and elevate the plane to avoid these storm clouds or whatever clouds they were. I did see that was part of the communications, and what the pilot was trying to do is avoid certain clouds, whether it was a storm or whatnot. They didn't say. They just said that clouds on the TV.
Well, yes, and there were reports that there was another plane ahead of them, and interesting reports. Ultimately, at 6:16, 4 minutes after the last contact, the plane was still visible on radar but quiet. At 6:17, there was only a ADS B signal, and then at 1 minute later, the plane completely disappeared from radar. Now, well, if you look at Hagmann and Hagmann.com, what I did, and I was watching this really late Saturday night, into early Sunday morning, and until the search was called off, which was early Sunday morning our time, due to darkness and what have you. I just find it interesting that normally you've got a debris field, whether it's on land or on water.
Yeah, if it crashes into the water, every seat's a flotation device. Styrofoam, there's so much on a plane that would float. It doesn't matter if the plane went from 30,000 feet and nosedived into the ocean. There is a lot of stuff that's going to come back up and show, at least if you're searching, you're going to see that debris field. If you hours or days later, you will still see things floating around. Kind of like the MH17. The debris does not disappear. If it's in water, it will float. If it landed on land, it might have burned up, but there would be obviously people who witnessed it, unless the crash on a remote island or in the Siberian tundra. I don't know. It doesn't make sense that they could lose another plane. They have fail-proof systems and backups upon backups of transmitters between the black box and transponder systems to be able to locate these planes. They don't disappear. The transponders, the black boxes, you could set them on fire with thermonuclear. From what I know, they're indestructible. From their own word.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that's correct. Now, one thing I want to caution listeners and everyone listening to this, we don't know what happened, okay, but we can reasonably speculate what did not happen. And I think we have to look at all potentials, all possibilities. The one thing I saw that bothered me a little bit, there were a lot, and I mean a lot, of so-called experts or people chiming in and attempting to compare this to Air France Flight 447 that crashed into the Atlantic back in 2009. They were flying from Rio to Paris, and there are some similarities here. However, I would caution people, just based on my research, about making such comparisons. Now, it kind of fits into the official narrative. What I find interesting, you've got really three aircraft in an area of the world that's interesting for many reasons, that have either disappeared or met their demise. Of course, MH370 disappeared. MH17 was shot down. And of course, the blame there was the blame. They were trying to blame the Russians on that one. But now, of course, and it's interesting to note too that it was days after after MH370 vanished that AirAsia, the plane that's got now, the executive chairman, I believe it was the executive chairman or one of the executives of that airline, of AirAsia, said we're never going to, we would never lose a plane like what happened to MH370. And don't forget, MH370 vanished with the 239 souls aboard. Goodness. So there's something definitely that is quite odd with respect to AirAsia flight QZ 8501, as well as MH370. And we pray for the passengers and crew and the souls aboard. But I definitely have to think that we're looking at a situation that needs additional investigation, out of the box thinking. I certainly suspect that. I really do. I mean, as Joe said, you'd have debris, a debris field in the water, and there's enough fuel in that plane too. If it crashed on land, you'd see it. So, yeah, that's But links off of Hagmann and Hagmann.com to the original story, the timeline, and then of course the comparisons to MH370. Interesting.
Yeah,
that was very interesting.
Very interesting. For those of you curious about this, I wanted to mention this because this is the first time that I've been to a movie theater in years, since I can remember. My wife and I went and saw the movie Exodus yesterday. It is a movie starring, I think, Christian Bale, and it is supposed to be based on the biblical account of Exodus, Moses and him leading the Israelites out of Egypt into the Promised Land. And my wife really liked the movie. I thought it was okay. It wasn't there was a lot of inaccuracies in the movie. Just to give a brief example of one, the Red Sea wasn't really parted in the movie. It kind of just disappeared, and then they brought it back as the Egyptians were chasing down the Israelites who were fleeing. And I'm not a guy to go see movies. I avoid it at all costs. My wife's probably been to 10 movies since we've been married, and they've all been by herself or with friends. But it was an interesting movie. It wasn't bad, but at the same time it wasn't. I'm going to go back and read through the story again of the Israelites leaving Egypt, because I believe there's a lot more inaccuracies there. And I don't know if anybody else saw it. Shoot me an email. Let me know what you think. Like I said, first movie I've seen in 5 to 10 years in a movie theater, and it was a good movie. I don't believe it was a great representation of the biblical account. All the general things you think are in there. The guy's name was Moses in the movie.
So they got that right?
Yes, they did. But it was, I guess you could say it was they made it a Hollywood version, kind of like the Noah movie that came out earlier this year. Probably wasn't too accurate biblically, but it had the overall gist of the message and the story. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you. One other thing before Nathan comes on, and I think this is important for people to really understand as well, because hacking is a big thing right now. Whether it's your bank account, whether it's your whatever it is, if it's your home computer, if it's your bank's computer, whatever. And think back, ladies and gentlemen, to various mysterious vehicle accidents. If you go to the London Times or the UK Times, they have an article there where they come out and say hackers could control your car remotely, drivers are told. And millions of cars are at risk of being hacked by, they say criminal gangs or terrorists who could steal information, extort money from drivers, or, and now listen to this, or even cause vehicles to crash. Modern cars are being fitted with wireless networks and internet connections to allow for music streaming, Bluetooth, that kind of stuff. However, this has created a potential for exploitation by hackers. They can access and control car systems, including braking, acceleration, and even steering. Now think about that. Everyone laughed and said, "Oh, this is a bunch of conspiracy nonsense." Remember the Michael Hastings accident? Oh, well, it took over his vehicle? Come on. What are you, crazy? No. Some experts came around and said, look, a lot of these cars are fitted with wireless networks and internet connections to allow for these various conveniences, or what we call conveniences, correct?
Yeah, Progressive, car insurance company, for one, has a program that if you put this box in your car, they will lower your insurance because they can monitor how you drive. We know also that I think it was the government that wanted to mandate the black boxes go inside cars by 2015, all new cars by 2015. I'm not sure how similar to a plane these black boxes are, or what they would record, or how they were recorded, but I'm sure people have seen the new commercials on or advertisements on cars that they're almost like smart cars. They can give you different noises if you're getting close to something, if somebody's in a lane and you're changing lane. I mean, the possibilities are endless now. They're pretty much talking about cars driving themselves.
Well, kind of a side note to that, don't forget, folks, we had talked about on this show that, in fact, there was a list of vehicles with kind of like black boxes that would record, or that do record, the vehicle's movements before and after an accident, during an accident, including your acceleration rate of acceleration, or braking prior to impact, or steering prior to impact. So the initial installation of this kind of technology dates back to 1994. That's right, 1994. And we talked about this. So we're hearing about certain things now, 20 years later. My goodness, 20 years later. Understand that this is extremely important, I think, because little by little, you don't know. I mean, and I used to laugh when people say, well, your dishwasher is spying on you, or your whatever television is spying on you. Or I used to laugh at that, thinking it's crazy. These people are kooks.
Well, when the CIA director came out and said as much, your dishwasher is spying on you.
Well, yeah, and it's really, in today's world, it's kind of to me, it's kind of a difficult concept to, well, not in today's world, but I mean, before, it's kind of a difficult thing for me to wrap my head around, because you just wouldn't expect that. Yeah.
It was explained to me that anything that can transmit any type of electricity or pulse that is plugged in is also able to receive, transmit. Basically,
anything can receive, can transmit. Yeah, exactly. It's a two-way street there, and boy, I'll tell you. And of course, the people who, there are people out there that say, well, I got nothing to hide. Well, that's not the point. Well, maybe for some it might be. The point is, we have a reasonable expectation of privacy, and of course we're moving so far away from, and have gone so far away from, a constitutional republic. It's gone. I mean, really, it's gone. The America as we had once known it is gone. And Ron Martin, just want to say hello, author of the book It's Over. Listening, sending his greetings. Thank you for tuning in, and we should have him on to talk about how over it really is, because it is over. I mean, a large part of, and there are ways. There are ways that we can take our country back. Will we? Probably not. Probably not. I would suggest one of the ways seriously, would be to surround the White House and Capitol with pitchforks and torches, like they did in the old days. You know, and I mean, am I being facetious? Well, sort of, but not really. Can we accomplish what we need to accomplish through the judicial system? No. Why not? Because while we were busy on other things, the people in power have corrupted the judiciary, regardless of levels, whether it's the highest court or the state courts or federal courts and other courts. They put their people in, and that's something that we have to understand. So we need to make our plans, work our plans, play our position, and know that we were born for a time like this, as I always like to say. And of course, we have to listen for our instructions. We've got to play our position, help others play their positions as well. Don't lose hope or faith, but understand we are under attack every day. But also understand that we're fighting from a position of victory. While we should and must understand that this is a war between good and evil, and a war that's rooted in the heavens, this is also a war that's physicality and in reality taking place on this earth as well. And some people like to say, well, no, you can't. No, it's a heavenly war. Well, no, wait a second. We are to be heavenly minded, but that does not mean that we are to lay down and just roll over and play dead. That's just not. I don't think that would be pleasing to God. And to those emails I get, and to those people who say that and promote that constantly, sorry, but that's just not how I feel. And good luck with that. If you want to sit back and watch your family get slaughtered, and sit back and say it's God's will and I'm not going to do anything, well then you know what? Don't ever come.
Well, we're told.
Don't even go there, man.
No, I was saying we're told to not worry about saving our own lives, but always to lay down our lives for another. We're never to do nothing.
Oh, okay. I was just thinking I was going to have to shoot you with in addition to our Nerf bat in our arsenal here in the
we got
some
Nerf guns.
Yeah, now with laser pointed accuracy Nerf guns. Thanks, John from Pasadena. Now we're really
John,
dangerous.
I don't think you know what you did. But with that, we do have Nathan with us. Nathan Leal, his website. Visit and bookmark his website as he has audio messages up there, forum, news, watchmanscry.com. That's watchmanscry.com. We are joined by Nathan Leal, a frequent guest on the Hagmann Hagmann Report. We got a lot of new stuff to get into and kind of a year in review and look into the new year. Nathan, we're glad to have you back on the show. How was your holiday?
Gentlemen, it's an honor and a pleasure, and I always appreciate you allowing me the opportunity to share the things that God has been laying on my heart and the things that I'm researching, because right now the people of God and the remnant of God and even the citizens of America need to know what's going on. They need to know the truth. They need to have the truth placed in front of them on the table so that they can then decide and make decisions based on truth, not based on hearsay or lies or propaganda. And in this late hour, a lot of people are making decisions based on lies and propaganda, and they will continue to do it. But the smart listeners that you have and that are led to your show are hungry for the truth, and I just appreciate being a part of that.
Well, I'll tell you what, we love our audience. I often say, Nathan, that we've got the greatest listening audience in the world. I truly believe that. And I'm talking about people from listening to this in Italy, in many countries. Actually, I think we'll close out the year by being broadcast or by being listened to, downloaded, or live airings in 71 countries. Last year was 65, I think it was. And every one of the people are valued people, in my opinion. And I got to tell you, they're smarter than the average person out there, much more intelligent, and they're hungry for the truth, to which you bring the truth. And you know, folks, let me just say this, okay? With regard to Nathan Leal and his lovely wife and what he does, and some people, I get an email saying, well, you like everybody. No, I don't. No, I don't. Believe me, that's my wife. I don't like everybody. But I'll tell you what, Nathan does such tremendous research. Man, Nathan, what are you, like 18 hours a day at research? I mean, it's like incredible. And we talked too. He called me a couple of times. We talked some of the stuff tonight. You better buckle up, because this is some heavy duty stuff tonight. But that's all I'm going to say. I'm just going to say you just put a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of energy into your research. So I appreciate that from an investigative point of view. And with that, my friend, boy, we could talk about all kinds of stuff like phase zero shaping. I never heard that. Or the pilot program for phase zero shaping, or the stuff in NDAA, or we talked about a gentleman, John Stanton, and human terrain teams, and the Asia pivot, and China, and the North Koreans, and the Pacifics, and the bases being built, and the Rand Corporation, Tavistock Institute. I don't think we left anything untouched during our conversations over the last several days. So wherever you want to start, my friend, the floor is yours.
Well, I want to try to present, because there's so much information that I have to share, I want to present it as in the best format and organized format and outline as I can, so that the listeners will not just hear it and then forget it tomorrow. I really want the information that I'm going to share tonight to be remembered and to be. In fact, I want to challenge the listeners to do this. Listeners, if you're not able to right now, listen to this program again, but take a lot of notes and follow up with some of the terms that I'm going to share tonight, because some of these terms are new, some are not new, they've just been hidden, or they've been out in the open in plain sight. I'm going to share some terms, Doug, that I believe will explain and help to help the average person to understand and be able to communicate with others why things are the way they are, why things are happening, what's happening with Russia, what's happening with China, the oil market crash. All of those things can be explained and understood. So I want to challenge the listeners to take a lot of notes. I'm also going to be providing a page of notes, as I've been doing lately. In fact, you can go to the website right now, Doug. I have placed some of them up on my homepage. There's a link to the Blog Talk program that you're listening to right now, but I also have a link to the notes and images. That is going to be, it's going to grow after this program is done in the next few hours and part of tomorrow. I have so much stuff I wanted to add to it. So listeners, if you can go to that page of notes and images, and if you listen to this program in the next day or two, there will be more information and links to back up everything I'm saying. Because, Doug, I'm not just bringing conspiracy theory. I'm not bringing opinion. I am going to try my best to use intellectual integrity and proper scholarship to prove and back up what I'm saying. I know that there is a great challenge with some of your listeners that live in divided households. There are some spouses that struggle with their husbands, or husbands that struggle with their wives or children, because the family members either do not believe it, they say it's not possible, or they don't want to believe it. So I'm going to provide information to help them, give them ammunition and fuel to communicate with their family members what is coming, because the hourglass is running out of sand right now, ladies and gentlemen. And I know that one of the biggest complaints that some people have is that, well, you guys are a bunch of boys that are constantly crying wolf. You say that this is going to happen and then it doesn't. Why should I believe you? Well, part of the exercise and discipline of a watchman, and for those in our shoes, Doug, as you well know, is that we don't always know the timing, but we do know it's coming. So what I want to challenge the listening audience is to understand that when the crash started in 2008, at that time, many of the watchmen, including me, believed that the next phase was impending. But over the last few years, hindsight, of course, being 20/20, we can understand and now look back that God, in His mercy, allows the judgment to occur, and then He'll offer a downtime so that people can awaken and respond to Him, and then He'll bring the next wave or the next phase. Well, being where we are in the calendar and on the timeline, we're about to enter the year 2015. We're about to go into year, what is it, year 6? The crash started in 08. What is that, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15? That's year 7. I've noticed as I've started examining the way the judgment is taking place that it's happening in a cycle of 7 years, and I've shared that on your program. I'm not the only one that has come up with that. Rabbi Kahn wrote a book about it. There are others that are seeing this, that they follow the Jewish calendar. So in the coming year of 2015, ladies and gentlemen, there are very, very huge events that are going to transpire. Some of the events will be developments, which will be a portion of an even bigger event, and some will be the events themselves. So I'm saying all that to say that the coming year, Doug, we need to fasten our seatbelts and prepare. I see the coming year as waves of judgment that are going to be on the increase, and the waves are going to be closer together, and they are going to hit us when we don't expect them. They're going to hit us when we didn't know they were going to hit us. They're going to catch a lot of people off guard. So the people that are not prepared and ready are going to pay a much higher price. So,
but Nathan, but we're being told, Nathan. I mean, my goodness, even Drudge had a headline. I think it was earlier today. I don't know. It's the time just forgive me. Time just all kind of jams together. And before that, I think some other economists said, first of all, everything is really, really rosy. The economy has never been better. Today, the world's never been safer. Life has never been better. And so, Nathan, are we to believe that that's just propaganda? That's just eye and ear candy, or what are we to believe about that?
The student of history and the person that's awake, the disciple of God that is awake, knows very clearly and easily that this one's a no-brainer for the astute person. Even in the Bible, Doug, we can see the Bible continually talk about the people who said things were great and it will never happen to me. Jerusalem said the same thing. We can read that in Isaiah, Jeremiah, and in the book of Revelation we can see that. Jesus even told us while people are doing their thing, buying and selling, sudden destruction is going to come. When we look at the Great Depression of the early 30s of the last century, after the initial crash of 29, all of the financial experts and politicians and academic credentialed people swore, and they stated in articles and in newspaper headlines and in quotes that was it. They were done. And now when we look back at history, we see that, boy, were they silly for their silly statements. So history proves we're following in the same path. The early depression proved it. The big crash then after 29, it was a slow bear market recovery. The dead cat bounce, but it didn't last, did it? In 32, it crashed even worse. So we're going to see the same thing occur. And what they're talking about, what they're not really sharing openly, is when they say things are great, they're talking about the bubble. Well, boy, is it shiny. But bubbles have a very thin skin, don't they?
Yes, it's the pretty rainbow appearance, the opalescent appearance of the bubble, and you can just don't stick your finger in it. It's not that. I mean, it's very thin. That's right. So, what do we have approaching in the year 2015? I want to sum it up with this. Now, we are going to see various categories of events happen in 2015, but one of the headlines that we're going to continue to see is that we are going to be seeing the gearing up of war for the United States against Russia and against others. War is going to become the developing story as public opinion of the West is swayed towards war. And in order for this to happen, the think tanks and the mad scientists and the Einsteins that live in the boiler rooms and the dungeons in various places of Virginia and away from Washington, D.C., are planning how they're going to pull this off, and not only planning, they have the plans. They're very good at it.
They're very good at propaganda, and they are going to sway the general population to accept war. The general population is going to be brainwashed first by the New World Order mad scientists into believing that Russia is bad. Now, Doug, if we go backwards to when the Super Bowl occurred almost a year ago, February 2nd, at that time, we had the Super Bowl. I came on your program where we talked about the warnings that they were secretly giving to the world. We talked about the prepare message and the destruction that was coming. It was all there in the open. But some of the things that I didn't have a chance to really focus on is coming to fruition now. And that has to do with how the Super Bowl started, and that was with the flyover. You remember that? Instead of having the two jets that usually fly over, we had 9 helicopters fly over the Super Bowl, and 3 of them were Chinooks, 3 were Black Hawks, and 3 were Apaches from the 101st Airborne Division, and they flew over the Super Bowl, which spoke volumes. We also saw during the halftime show, after Bruno Mars was finished singing, he finished up with shout-outs from various service people in the military who gave shout-outs to their loved ones. And we briefly spoke about that. And when I saw those shout-outs, the way that I research is I'll pray to God and I'll ask him, God, what do I focus on? Show me what makes sense and what's important and what doesn't. And the shout-outs were screaming. There was a red flag on the shout-outs. Now, most people probably at this point in the year cannot go back and hear the shout-outs, but in the shout-outs we had several individuals from different parts of the military. There were 7 of them who spoke to their loved ones. And several of those individuals who gave the shout-outs were from the 101st Airborne, again. So having a flyover from the 101st and then the shout-outs from the 101st, we have to place that on the table and ask the question, why? We also saw shout-outs occurring and coming from the Marines office of the Marine Corps Forces Europe and Africa. That's basically Euro Central Command's headquarters that's located in Germany, and the shout-outs came from individuals who are at Euro Command. Now, Euro Command, for those that do not know, the United States has divided the world into several regions of command, and the way it works is several generals and admirals are in charge of their respective areas and the countries that fall under their areas. So in the world, we have U.S. NORTHCOM, which is North Command for the United States, Canada, Mexico, and parts of Middle America. We also have U.S. South Command, which South America. We have U.S. Euro Command, which encompasses battles that would take place in Europe against Russia. And then we have Central Command, which is for the Middle East, Africa Command, and then Pacific Command, or PACOM, Pacific Com. So during the Super Bowl, we had the shout-outs coming from Euro Command. Now, back then, I asked the question why, and it raised suspicion with me, Doug, and we talked about it. Why did they give shout-outs from Euro Command? Well, it's because they're letting us know that they're going to be involved in a new theater of war in the coming future with Russia. Now, at the time of the Super Bowl, February 2nd, Mr. Putin was not the enemy of the United States. For the most part, Vladimir Putin was Chuck Norris of the world. And you've seen all the images and how people make fun of that and have fun with it. He's cool. He rides bears and flies jets and ski boats, etc. He can pilot the Sputnik, and he can do all kinds of great things because he's Putin. Well, after February 2nd, a few weeks later, we had the Winter Olympics in Sochi. He was still Chuck Norris. But then a few weeks later, at the beginning of March, what did we see happen? We saw the beginnings of the uprising in the Ukraine. And it turned on a dime overnight. It was amazing, Doug, how the news reports started talking about how Russia was the bad guy and Russia was evil and Russia was doing all these horrible, terrible things. But what we really saw was that the battle over the Ukraine had begun. Now, the battle over Ukraine took place and consisted of several things. At the very beginning, it had to do with a measure that was passed in the Ukraine amongst the parliament of Ukraine to allow them to enter the Euro, the economic union, the Eurozone.
Right.
But the United States, and everything was great there for them to enter it, but the United States has a habit of, in order to ensure that the people want to follow the dictates of America's foreign policy, they make sure that they add icing to the dictates by placing their provocateurs and CIA assets to make sure that the people would follow the requirements of the United States. Well, it didn't go so well, and at that time, the Ukraine was scheduled later in the year to enter the Eurozone, but the president of the Ukraine started meeting with Putin, and Putin counter-offered what the IMF was offering the Ukraine. Now, the IMF said, we'll give you so many $1 billion, I believe it was $4 billion, but if you want to get the money, you have to also abide by our stipulations and our requirements, and you have to lower your budget, you have to bring in a lot of cost-cutting measures, you have to cut the retirement benefits for all of your citizens, et cetera, et cetera, and Putin came in and offered something that was better. So the IMF was at it, as usual, the way they do it. They go into a country and they hold that country to the fire, they back them into a corner and make financial threats and say, you're not going to make it unless you take our loans. So most of the world takes the IMF loans, and then before they know it, they're in trouble. And the IMF has them by the noose and places a hook in their jaw. Well, the Ukraine didn't want to do that, so it was announced that he was not going to follow this new plan from Russia. From the IMF. So then we saw the uprising begin. And the uprising consisted, of course, Russia did not want the Ukraine to follow, and it was called the Plan on Priority Measure for European Integration of the Ukraine. It was issued on March 12th, and they didn't want to follow it. So they announced 1 week before they were going to sign their commitment to the EU, they announced that they are no longer going to join the EU. Well, the United States had a backup plan. If, in case the Ukraine decides not to follow it, we have our CIA assets ready, we have our provocateurs ready, and they're going to cause a revolt and uprising, and that's exactly what they did. So we saw that happen in March. 1 month after the Super Bowl, it began.
Yes, exactly. And Nathan, if I can just add, folks, it's so important to understand, these uprisings are not spontaneous. They are very carefully orchestrated, planned, and done at a specific time for a specific purpose, as Nathan is saying. Just to recap something you said, too, about the Super Bowl before we go on, the number 9, the 3, 3, and 3 helicopters, very important number in occult numerology and significance. And don't forget, Nathan, as well, and we can come back to this, too, the Mercedes commercial that promised a thrilling fourth quarter, and, of course, the lights out, the blackout period in the Super Bowl that you had referenced earlier in earlier shows. But I don't want to get you too far off track, but all of these little things that normal people would blow off and say, or people thinking within the matrix would say, it's just whatever. But folks, look at it now in retrospect. Go ahead, sir.
So the biggest thing that must be understood by the listening audience, because we're given propaganda, and the news is great. They're geniuses at swaying the public away from the real truth and the true facts, and they bring in a red herring or something that has nothing to do with the true situation. The reason that the Ukraine is so important, now let's talk about this. When the Iron Curtain fell, when the Soviet Union ceased to exist in 1991, Mr. Zbigniew Brzezinski, the evil man that we've talked about in the past, wrote a book. He wrote several books, actually, but in his book, he said that the Ukraine, it was a satellite of the Soviet Union, but now that the Soviet Union broke up, the Ukraine must not fall into Russia's hands in the future, or else Russia could be a superpower. And he said that in 1998. And he said However, without the Ukraine, Russia will cease to be a Eurasian empire. So the reason that the United States and the West and NATO and the EU does not want Russia to have the Ukraine is because the Ukraine sits at a very strategic location on the map. It sits at a choke point between Europe and Russia, and Ukraine. The Ukraine serves the land serves as a conduit so that Russia can sell oil to Europe. And right now, Europe gets 25% of its oil from Russia, and Russia wants that to continue because as it continues, Russia is able to have the funds to continue as a nation and to buy weapons and defense equipment, etc. But if Russia doesn't have the ability to sell oil, then they won't have as much money and they stay a smaller nation. So that's one of the things that's going on.
Right, and I mentioned this the past couple of shows, Nathan. Russia's oil and gas exports are equivalent to about 68% of their exports or their economy. So in other words, 68% of their economy is oil and gas exports, and of course, much or some of that going directly to Europe. So what you're talking about is so important. Just want to echo that. Go ahead.
Right. Now, Russia knows that they need the Ukraine. The United States knows that, or in their opinion, does not want Russia to have the Ukraine. So in a way, it's already a war. It's to prevent Russia to have the ability to be strong. Now, in addition to the Ukraine, they're tugging at the Ukraine. In the next hour and in hours 2 and 3, we're going to break this down and talk about what Russia is planning and what is happening right now before our nose. Doug, today it's December the 29th. Let me just throw a little teaser out there. In 3 days, or in 4 days, on January the 1st, for the listeners that do not know this, a huge historical event is about to take place. We have the EU as an established economic union. They have their own money. They're allied together. And the EU has its history already. We know what that means, and we know the plan for the future of the world. The New World Order wants to have the world divided into 10 similar unions. Russia is about to have the commencement of its own economic union starting in 4 days. On January the 1st, 2015, the Euro-Asia Union will become alive. And Putin is the leader of it. It's his dream. And he has stated, he has been quoted as saying that his dream is to see his economic union bring back the satellite states that were lost after the breakup of the Soviet Union. He wants all of them. He does know that he's not going to get back 3 of them, though, the Baltic states, which consists of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania, which is north of the Ukraine below Finland. By the way, we're going to be talking about a lot of geography tonight, ladies and gentlemen, and after the program I will put up maps so that you can see and visualize if you have the ability to have a globe. It's important to know this. Ladies and gentlemen, learn geography because you're going to be hearing about the new theaters of war in different parts of Europe and in Asia, so we need to get familiar with these areas now. But this thing is about to start, Doug, and I see the time. I see we're at the top of the hour, so I will continue on the other side, but I have a lot of information that shows that we are seeing the beginnings of war right now.
Absolutely, Nathan, and we're going to take our top of the hour break right now, and we'll come back with that and much more on the other side. Folks, listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, December 29th, 2014, our last Monday show. Today is the 29th. We're joined by Nathan Leal. His website is watchmanscry.com. We're talking about things from last year, red flags, things that we see in the news and in Scripture, and what we're going to be gearing up for in 2015. With that, Nathan, I'm going to turn it right back over to you and let you pick up where you left off.
Thank you, Joe. Listeners, I want to ask the listeners if they're taking notes. I'm going to give a list of some of the words for them to become familiar with, and I'm going to try my best to touch as many of them as possible, or I will be adding them to my notes. I will also be following up on a future News from the Wall. It's going to be coming out in the next few days that's going to go very, very deep into this. So if you're on my alert list, I'll send you the notification when it comes out. Otherwise, just keep checking back, or you can subscribe to notifications. It's going to be several hours long, and it needs to be because, Doug and Joe, there are so many things that are coming. But let me just give a brief a list of some of these words that we need to become acquainted with. Now, in the past, we've talked about Tavistock being one of the headquartered laboratories for mental development, for societal engineering, and for brainwashing, etc., that exists in Europe. Well, the counterpart to Tavistock is the RAND Corporation, which exists stateside here. So I'm going to be talking about them. We're going to see them involved in future stories, whether it's in front of us, whether it's announced or whether it's done in secret. They are going to be involved in the coming societal brainwashing to lead America to war. That's their job. Their job is to convince America that war is a good idea. They are the ones that were responsible for the term mutually assured destruction. They came up with the Northwoods document, which goes back into the 60s, the false flag operation. They have been involved in a lot of different propaganda-type creations, and they're involved right now. We're also going to see Tavistock involved in the propaganda machine in Europe. Also, another word to become familiar with is a term that we are not hearing in the news, and it's called Novorossia. That's spelled Novorossia. Novorossia. Doug, we've talked about this off the air. That's one of the true stories that's going on in the Ukraine. Novorossia stands for New Russia. And we're going to go into that if we have enough time. Also, ladies and gentlemen, become familiar with the different command centers of our military. PA Command, or PACOM, stands for Pacific Command, and I'm going to be talking about that and the region of the earth that entails. We're also going to talk about Asia Pivot. The Asia Pivot is one of Obama's new military strategies that he announced in 2011, that has to do with switching America's focus instead of from the Middle East. It's going to be switched to Asia, and new bases are going to be built. This is in preparation to war with China. That's all out in the open. And we're also going to talk about what the military is funding as far as some of the programs that are gearing up for the coming war. Another word is cognitive joint force entry. If you're taking notes, you can Google this word. That is one of the methods that the United States is going to be brainwashing American citizens. Cognitive joint force entry. Also, human terrain development, human domain development. We're going to be hearing about that, as well as phase zero shifting. Now, Doug, at the beginning of the program, you threw those terms out. I'm throwing them out right now because for a person not acquainted with them, it sounds very strange and they sound difficult to grasp. But if we can get a hold of, and I want to challenge for the listeners that are out there, if you have a blog site, if you have a blog talk, a radio program, if you're a journalist, research these terms and get the word out there, because these terms are the strategies of the New World Order. They're going to use these strategies against us. So let me now continue. Let's get back to what I was talking about. Now, gearing for war. The United States is in Operation Propaganda right now, and that's going to entail it's going to require and use the resources of propaganda tools that Americans already love to be entertained with, meaning movies, video games, news stories, reports, TV news programs, and news reports. The propaganda campaign is going to be used to convince Americans that war is necessary with Russia and also possibly in North Korea and China. As an example, Doug, we talked about this off the air. That movie, by the way, that movie is disgusting and it is foul and it's an embarrassment. It is not a movie that families should take to watch with their children. It's disgusting, Doug. It is the dumbest, worst movie in the world. But
what movie again?
The Interview.
The Interview. Okay, I wanted to make sure that's exactly what you said. Yeah.
It's disgusting. I thought it was just a typical movie, so I previewed it, and I wasn't able to watch the whole thing, Doug. It was. But what I did is because I wanted to know what the main message was, so I scrubbed through it, and Doug, it was embarrassing. It was You have to take a shower after you watched it. I had to go pray through after I saw it. So I'm just letting you know, ladies and gentlemen, it is not a movie for families, and it surprises me that that's how low American society and morality has come, that they would use a movie that is so foul that promotes homosexuality and death and murder and just disgusting sexual innuendo as a foreign policy tool to get Americans to hate Korea. But that shows how low we have come. It shows how low we have sunk. It reveals that America has been dumbed down, is down to the level of idiots, because that's what they have. That's the tools they have to work with, Doug. That's it. But that movie, The Interview, Seth Rogen and James Franco were in it, and they were interviewed by Hollywood to promote the movie, and Seth Rogen is on record. He said that when they were filming that movie, there were government officials there as consultants to lead the way, to influence the script. And Seth Rogen said from his mouth that he believes that the consultants were CIA. It's on record. In fact, he has stated that he had emailed one of the consultants that he got to know on the set, and he said, hey, by the way, where is Mr. Kim Jong? And the consultant wrote back and said, he's going to be off the radar for 2 weeks. He's having ankle surgery. And Seth Rogen said that at that time it was not on any news report. The New York Times didn't know about it. No one in the whole world knew about it, but he received that information in an email, which proved the guys are CIA. Now, why would the CIA use a stupid movie? Well, look at the result, Doug. How many people said, "Yeah, I'm gonna kick Kim Jong in the stomach by paying my hard-earned money, $7-10 to go watch it or download it, etc., because I'm paying him back and showing that I'm an American." Which is that what we have sunk to, Doug, to show the? Well,
yeah. I mean, that would have been my mentality a decade ago. I mean, I'll be the first to admit it. That would be having not have been awakened by the truth. I would have been the biggest proponent of that because, yeah, I'm patriotic. I'm flag waver. You fall for the lie until you start looking around, and I'm kind of ashamed to admit that. But once you understand that the lie is different at every level, and we're living a big lie, we're being told a big lie, then you understand what's really going on, and you're doing a fine job in outlining it. So go ahead and
well,
continue.
The plot thickens, Doug. Now, get this. Some people would say, Nathan, come on, CIA, really? Well, when we start looking behind the scenes, what's this, ladies and gentlemen? The CEO of Sony sits on the board of the RAND Corporation. The brother of Tavistock, the propaganda machine, he sits on the board of the propaganda machine of the CIA and DARPA and the U.S. military. Now,
wow,
what is that?
Well, Hollywood, magic, magician spells, programming, mind takeover, right? I mean, all of this. Wow, it's incredible.
The name of the CIO, his name is Michael Linton, Lynton. If you want to look him up, look at his wiki page. It says he sits on the board of the RAND Corporation. So the RAND Corporation's running the show, and we're going to see a continuation of propaganda to prepare the United States citizenry for war. Now, in order to change the thinking of Americans, they're weary of war. They're tired of war. So in order to turn them around, it's going to require several false flag events. In the coming year, I can see some developing. I can see some occurring. And this isn't just going to be 2015. We're going to see this happen until we are in full-blown World War III. So some of the false flags will be small, and some will be large eventually. When the time is right, and when the citizens of America are ripe for nationalism and hatred towards Russia and whatever other chosen countries they have decided we're going to go to war against, there's going to be a huge false flag that's going to be blamed on Russia, North Korea, China, or another non-state group, terrorist organization like ISIS, etc. So we're going to be hearing about that, Doug, and it's to galvanize America to want to send our boys to sign up. Son, you need to go sign up to fight the enemy because they have done wrong to America. So we're going to see that happen. Also, Doug, this is another thing that I've noticed appear in just the last few weeks, and I've talked about this off the air with you on the phone. It appears that the powers that be have narrowed their choices for candidates for president, and right now, where it stands, I am starting to hear the same two names for candidates. Hillary, it's going to be a Hillary versus Jeb Bush presidential ticket, a run.
Yeah, Nathan, there's been a lot of articles recently in the news, land of the dynasties, another Bush-Clinton election. These are some of the headlines I've come across. And they're trying to change things around by throwing Elizabeth Warren in there as a contender. I see Rand Paul's also being mentioned in the news, but I believe you're right. I don't know if the American people would. I hope they do another Bush-Clinton election because I believe it would snap many of the politically motivated and the people that look to politics as a solution out of their brainwashed state.
Yeah, Nathan, I got to tell you, if I see Bush v. Clinton again, man, well, aside from that, aside from the time warp, you got demonstrably two sides of the same phoenix. Really, I mean, two wings of the same bird, the same phoenix, and the New World Order. So.
We could do entire programs on the Bush dynasty and the involvement with the Illuminati, Nazism, etc., at the highest level. So, by the way, Barbara said he was a smart one. You remember that?
Yeah.
Jeb Bush was a smart one. So,
yeah.
This does happen.
Well, by the way, wasn't Jeb also involved in the security company on 9/11? Wasn't he
was.
The one that was? Okay, or was that Marvin? Or I don't know. But yeah, Jeb. Okay, all right.
Now watch this, Doug. All of those citizens that got legalized, Jeb Bush has a connection with the Hispanic community.
With the Hispanic community?
Yes. The Hispanics like him. He has a connection with the Spanish community. He is liked by them, and they can massage this thing for all it's worth. If Jeb Bush
Common Core
wins,
too. Those are the 2 points that he differs from mainstream Republicans on, is the immigration and the Common Core.
Right. But if he wins, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to assure, for sure, I will have no doubt, Doug, that war is going to come against Russia and China and others, because the Bushes are warmongers and they're neocons, and they have their pockets in the defense companies, and they would stand to gain and become very, very wealthy to their already high level of wealth. Now, there's another story that happened recently in the last few weeks. I have a friend who works at Baker Hughes in Houston, Texas. Baker Hughes is a $36 billion company that makes oil field equipment throughout the world. And in November, just in the last few weeks, Halliburton made a bid to purchase them, to purchase Baker Hughes. This is not on the news, but this is why I have red flags about this purchase. It's because with what we already know is occurring in the oil industry, in the fracking, with the fracking companies throughout the country, in different states, they're going bankrupt, they're struggling. The Saudis have already stated that they don't plan to change the direction of the price of oil until the summer, I believe, or until their next meeting. So they're going to let this thing bleed. So oil companies right now are hurting. So my question, the big question I have, Doug, is why in the world would Halliburton decide to buy an oil company for $36 billion? Why would they do that right now? Now, that's the first question I have. And then in order to research this, I have to ask, well, what do they stand to gain from doing this if markets are down right now? Well, Baker Hughes has a huge footprint in Russia. They have many offices in Europe, and they have relations in Russia right now. Baker Hughes does, Halliburton does not. So then I have to ask the question, well, so does Halliburton know something that we don't know? In other words, are we going to see, does Halliburton know that they're going to be awarded huge no-bid contracts to repair and replace infrastructure that is about to be destroyed in the coming war? You see, that's very suspect, because Doug, when we go back to the several wars in Iraq, all of those no-bid contracts, Dick Cheney, we know about all that mess, overcharging.
Yeah.
Halliburton is already getting situated for the crumbs in the aftermath to wipe up the ashes of the coming war. So keep that on the radar, put it on the shelf, and let us consider why. We're not hearing about it right now, but that raises huge red flags of concern. By the way, my friend who works at Baker Hughes told me that they're going to be laying off up to 1/4 of Baker Hughes employees. They're going to get fired because there's redundant.
Wow.
Yeah, there's redundant job positions. So Halliburton's going to go in there and just skim everything, and the continual butchering of the oil industry is taking place, which, by the way, gets us back to what we talked about several months ago. America is under judgment, ladies and gentlemen, and because of America's hard-heartedness and because America has animosity toward God and is stubborn toward God, the judgment's going to continue. So we're going to see the ways of judgment that many of the watchmen and servants of God who have already been told and who have already been warning over the past few years, that thing is in motion. The darkness that's coming over America in 2015 is going to be horrific, Doug and Joe. It's going to be a darkness that can almost be felt. Isn't it amazing from the time of the beginning of this year, 2014, to where we are now, Doug and Joe, the racial hatred that has developed just in 1 year is off the charts. The division of America is in motion.
Nathan, before we get off on that, I just got an email here from David G. Thank you, David, for this. He writes this, Nathan, and I think we have a financial insider that goes by the initial V, and he's on our program quite frequently. We actually had some scheduling problems trying to get him back on. For those who have asked where he's been. David G. writes this: don't forget there's yet another huge reason that's so important to the West and the U.S. in particular to have total control over Ukraine, because it's integral to this huge project that China and Russia have going called the New Silk Road. And V reported on this back in July. He said that where the New Silk Road pushes through into Europe is through Ukraine, and the U.S. is not invited to play a part in this project. And it's set to put many countries on the map where they connect to this project, and they're going to have a tremendous economic benefit. Now, without the USA playing a part or having control of it, of course. So the bankers as well are heavily involved, just as we saw with the Caspian Sea and Afghanistan and the Taliban. We have this New Silk Road in this part of the world. So just want to mention that as well.
Thank you. And indeed, that is true. And the IMF and the henchmen in the West do not want Russia to benefit financially. So that's why they're trying to put a stop to this. And it goes back to what Brzezinski said. If we keep Ukraine out of their hands, then they cannot be a superpower. So he's exactly right. Now, moving on, Doug, I can't say it enough. We could spend a lot of time, and by the way, we will spend a portion, talking about geopolitical events and meandering and maneuvering that's taking place right now, but we cannot forget that there is a spiritual element to this thing behind the scenes. God is going to allow the maneuvering to result in war, and a lot of people are going to perish in the coming war. The war is going to span and bring mayhem to a lot of different categories that people rely on in their regular day-to-day life, like their finances and food prices, freedoms, the freedom to not worry about crime and evil elements when someone goes to a shopping mall, but that thing's done. We have all of those protests that have become absurd, and Doug, there's no logic now to some of those protests. The Ferguson protesters, I don't know, did they lose their brain power now? They're walking into buildings, they're walking into businesses, they're walking into shopping malls, just embarrassing themselves, showing that they're not thinking straight. And that's what evil does, though. When God brings judgment, confusion also takes over the minds and thoughts of many people. We saw that during Nazi Germany. Regular thinking is thrown out the window. The ability to have logic, rationale, and righteous thought is done away with, because when evil takes over, confusion and mayhem also is a part of that package. And we're watching the beginnings of that. We're seeing it play out here in America, and it's only going to get worse. But it's going to get worse because of the darkness that is coming over the land, and God's going to let it happen. So the number one thing that the listening audience must continue to keep in mind is that we cannot just be observing these programs these things that I'm saying, and the articles I put out, or the alerts that others put out, the Steve Quayle articles, and all of my colleagues and you. All of the articles that are placed out cannot just be observed from a sideline point of view. They have to be taken to prayer, and people need to take heed to these things. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to do something about your situation. You need to prepare for your situation. Time is running out. Doug, the grains of sand are running out, because as the momentum builds in 2015 into 2016-17, the time to look back and have regret and say, oh, I wish I could have, will be behind us. So, ladies and gentlemen, Please do not delay. The affliction is coming, the pounding is coming, and it's going to occur in several categories. Food's going to become more expensive in the days ahead. Already we're seeing beef prices go up, and it's going to only get worse. We're going to see the price of eggs and fowl, chicken, all across the board. We're going to see the increase in food prices. If we do end up going to war in 2015 or 16 or 17, major wars bring food rationing. We already know that. So that's another thing I want to challenge, ladies and gentlemen. Get your pantry arranged now and take these matters to God. What I am sharing...
Nathan, and you had a dream about this not too long ago that you shared with us and our audience about being in line and the price of food being so high that I forget what it was that you had it. Bread, milk, and a few other things, but I think it was $17 for the eggs. I can't remember the exact numbers that you had, but you did share this with us, that the food was going to be there. The money to buy the food was what was in question.
I noticed in that dream, food went up 8 to 10 times, so up to 100%. So if a dozen eggs was $1.50 or $2, it was $17, $20. And we're going to see that. So that's why I just want people to know that this thing's going to happen. Now, for the individual that may be struggling, we've gone over this in previous shows, Doug and Joe, and I know that in the natural, because we come from a first world scientific brainwashing mind, that God doesn't give warnings and prophetic glimpses. Well, let me put that to rest. And it's already on record, Joe. It's beyond argument. I came on your program on October in the week after October 13th. I had the prophetic dream on the 11th. It's on record, and by the way, in my show notes, I have a link to the prophecies about oil crashing. That was several months ago. So it's on record. God gave it in advance and by the way, it was a sign. The Standard Oil sign fell out of the sky, landed on the ground. I have the link to my website. I don't want to deviate, but God gave that as a sign to let everyone know that it was about to happen. And since we are seeing that happen, we're seeing the drop of gas prices and oil at a historical level. And Doug, we know this. We see it. People are enjoying it, but let us not get too excited about it, because that dream also included some very bad things. I saw a plane crash in a downtown area. A downtown area was destroyed, and which included a grain silo that was empty of food. And then we also saw the Glory of America crash as a rocket. We have another program about that. People can go and listen to it. But that thing is in motion right now. Now, I want to move on.
Exactly.
Thank you. I did have another prophetic dream that I had in 2010. And if you're in the notes page, it says past prophecies. One of them was the stealing of retirement funds by the federal government. And in that dream, I saw a bald eagle that was dying land in my chicken yard, and it fell on its stomach and reached into the nest eggs and started breaking the eggs and eating all the chicken eggs. And then it recovered it changed color. It turned orange, and the head of a fox was replaced by eagle head, so it turned into a golden eagle's body with the head of a fox, and it started grinning. But what that dream meant was that the U.S. government is very weak. They are hungry. They're starving for money, and at some point in the future, they are going to steal the nest eggs, meaning the retirement funds. That's been on record for several years. If you're at the notes page, Doug, this is a new program that it's been in the level of proposal. It's been shifted around, but now they have their own website. It's called the MyRA proposal. It's Obama's latest scheme to steal the retirement funds, the 401k funds. This thing it's in its infancy. I have a link to their website. Doug, we haven't heard much about it, but how interesting is it that they call it? Now, some people would say, Nathan, it's MyRA for a retirement account. Yeah, sure it is. But the continual pattern that we seem to see from Obama is associations with the East and Eastern mysticism and the Middle East and Muslim beliefs. So this is no different. MyRA was, by the way, who is he? He is believed to rule in all parts of the created world. He's the creator of the sky, the earth, the underworld, and he's the king of Pharaoh. He tells Pharaoh what to do.
The sun worshippers God, right?
Yes.
Yes. And this is all part, folks, the Illuminati, the sun worshippers, the Eastern mysticism that Nathan is talking about. People at some point, and this as an investigator, Nathan, and I'll just say it publicly too. I admire the way you connect some dots because, as an investigator, working cases and finding patterns of certain cases, that's what you do. That's what I've done, and you've done that remarkably well. And then you've gone beyond, looked outside of the box. And folks, it's hard to do. It's getting very difficult to deny. So go ahead, sir.
One of the engineers of this new program, we're going to be hearing about her in the future, Teresa Gilarducci. Do you see? I have a link to her. She has a website. She's one of those feminist, liberal think tank individuals who has stated openly, and if you go to their link right there, she says that right now IRA accounts are voluntary, but it's a detriment and it needs to be changed. So they're working on it's going to become mandatory, Doug and Joe. And ladies and gentlemen, please know this. The federal government is bankrupt, and there is approximately, $15, $16 trillion in retirement funds, something like that, Doug, and they want that money. So what they're going to do is they're going to require those funds to be nationalized, and then all the individuals who have access, have accounts with this new scheme will be given treasury notes as an exchange for the bankrupt dollar, which is coming. So retirement funds are going to be stolen, and then when the dollar crashes, the value of these funds will become worthless. But then the other sad part of the fact is that right now some people can take their money out and just suffer a tax consequence, but in the new scheme, that's going to be done away with, which is what Teresa Gilarducci admits. She says people can take the money can be tapped, retirement accounts can be tapped before retirement, but that's bad. So we need to change that. So this thing is in motion right now. Retirement funds are going to be stolen. So for individuals who have retirement accounts, this is a very important matter, Doug. I'm not going to give counsel on what to do, but this is something that's very important to take to God, because people need to start thinking about it now, what they're going to do. They need to have an exit plan so that their money is not stolen. So, ladies and gentlemen, make it a matter of prayer, please. Doug, this thing cannot be forgotten. Do not just let it be a program and something you heard Nathan say, and then a year go by, and then your money's stolen, ladies and gentlemen. Do something about it now. Take it to God and follow this development.
Exactly. And folks, I don't have a retirement account. I don't have an IRA. I don't have that. Bad planning on my part. But if I did, I'm going to tell you flat out right now, I'd take whatever hit was necessary. I'd get it all out. That's me. That's the only advice I can offer if it were me. Because I'll tell you something. People like this this moron, this Teresa Ghilarducci, the SCEPA director, she'd rather take your money, and I'd rather have, a half a pie than no pie at all.
Indeed. Thank you, Doug. So prayer, pray. Psalms 1:1. We need godly counsel, and then we need to take it to prayer. Now, moving on, I just mentioned the oil crash, and I also mentioned what's going to occur on January 1st, 2015. Let's talk about that, Doug. Let's talk about why World War III is going to occur with Russia. Now, when this economic union develops and grows in strength, right now it's at its very infancy, and so far Russia has 5 members. If you are able to click on that link, it has a story in there talking about it. Russia expands Eurasian Union to compete with the EU. Right now, if you don't have a picture of Russia, I'm going to place that after the program is done. But right now, Russia has just 5 countries, and one of the biggest ones is Kazakhstan, or who they have at the moment, with some of, let me see, I have it right here, some of the 5 that some of the nations that they want, they're not getting. But the Ukraine is one that they wish they could get, but the United States is not going to let it happen. And here's the other thing that needs to be made very clear. As V just emailed Doug, the Silk Highway needs to go through the Ukraine. Right. The Ukraine is very, very important, but something else is occurring in the Ukraine. The Ukraine is going through a civil war, and when we look at the history of the Ukraine has not always had the real estate that it has right now. In times past, the Ukraine was smaller, and the southern portion of the Ukraine went by a different name, and it's the name that I just mentioned, Novorossiya. Novorossiya is the term for southern Ukraine that existed before the Soviet Union merged them together, and that was in the 30s. So before that, the southern part of the Ukraine was its own individual area. After the Soviet Union broke up in 1991, the Ukraine still had what existed, including the southern part, but the southern part of the Ukraine is more nationalistic toward Russia, and over the past few months, Putin has been on record calling the southern Ukraine by that term, Novorossiya. And he has been stating that Novorossiya needs to break away from the Ukraine so they can be independent and be an ally of Russia. So Russia would be satisfied with just receiving the southern part. If the bottom part can break up, he would then have the pipeline and the Silk Highway to go into Europe. Now, if you're able to see a map of Novorossiya on my website, I have a link. Doug, if you're there, it says, here's why Putin is calling Eastern Ukraine. You're there? Yep. Okay, yep. I have a picture of Novorossiya, the new Russia, and why it's important. And if you look to the eastern part of New Russia, Novorossiya, that's Moldova. That's a tiny little country sitting next to the Ukraine, to the west of the Ukraine. Russia also wants Moldova to join his union. If Moldova joins, and if the breakout satellite portions of the Ukraine also join the eastern, the Euro-Asia zone, then Russia will have its Silk Highway. So at all costs, the United States and the EU and NATO does not want the Ukraine to break apart. So what we are going to see World War III over, this is what it has to do with, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be hearing about this in the future. So far, the far eastern portions of southern Ukraine have seceded, and that's the area of Donbass. You see that word right there? And Donbass consists of the Lugansk region and the Donetsk region. That's eastern Ukraine. But there are other regions that continually flow west,
And we're going to see those regions also secede from the Ukraine. And as they secede, we're going to see the Ukraine fight it, because they cannot have. If Russia has all of these nations secede, then the new Russia region will exist, and then Moldova is going to join the Euro-Asia Union, and Russia will then have its pipeline and its Silk Highway. So it cannot let that happen. The IMF does not want that to happen. Brzezinski does not want that to happen, but Russia's halfway there, because the Lugansk region and the Donetsk region and eastern and southeastern Ukraine has already seceded, and we're going to see the other portions secede. So, Doug, that region is not talked about. We don't hear Fox News talk about Novorossiya and why Russia wants it, and we're not hearing that a lot of the citizens of southern Ukraine are favorable to Russia. And when we saw the Georgian war a few years ago, Russia went in there and did a brilliant move. It made all Georgian citizens who had lineage with Russia, he made them citizens. Do you remember that?
Exactly.
In
yes,
Georgia?
I do. Yes.
I can see that happening in southern Ukraine. He's going to make any citizens in southern Ukraine who are part of the new Russia, Novorossiya, become Russian citizens. It's a move that is a pre-war thing, so that the Russian citizens will then feel nationalistic when the World War III begins. So this is a preview of what's coming.
Exactly. And Nathan, if you'll indulge me for 15 seconds, folks, you've heard this on our program before. What Nathan's talking about is really the future, the energy, the strategic locations. We play this now for the context. There it is.
How much are you worth?
I have no idea. How much do you want?
No, I just want to know what you're worth. Over $10 million?
Oh, my, yes.
Why are you doing it? How much better can you? What can you buy that you can't already afford?
The future, Mr. Gitz. The future.
And Nathan gave the context for that clip that we play. That's why we play it, Nathan. Now, from now on, every time we play it, people will think of you in this program, perhaps, because we're seeing it being set up for the future. And, of course, at the same time, the taking out of the petrodollar, in addition to all of the things that you talked about. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Doug. Now, the nations that have decided to join the Euro-Asian Union are not many at the moment, but Russia is dating them. He's massaging them. He's offering them a lot of benefits to join them, and Russia really, really needs more of these satellite countries to join his new union, because if you read between the lines, and I have looked at several news reports about the new union, and ladies and gentlemen, if you want to do it, just Google it and read all about it. But Putin has already stated it's a dream that he has to reunite the old Soviet bloc countries, and he wants as many as possible. He's fighting over the Ukraine. If he can get the southern part, I think he'll be happy with it. So the United States cannot let the Ukraine break apart. But he is not going to get the Baltic nations that are north. So he really needs the Ukraine, because right now the only highway is north of the Ukraine, which is Belarus, and that Belarus is also going to be joining the Union. So that's one of the highways that Russia has so far, but he really needs the Ukraine because their military base is in Crimea, and then the base would have access to protect the pipelines that is going through southern Ukraine. Now, we're going to be hearing about more countries debating over joining them. Albania just joined them, and many of the STAN-type ex-Soviet satellite nations. You know, most Americans, we're not used to all of those. It's like Greek when we look at a map, Doug. I mean, honestly, most people don't know Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, all those STAN nations that were part of Russia, but Russia wants them back. So we're going to see a tug-of-war between them, because if Russia gets them back, part of his dream is to also offer these countries military support. So if Russia can get these STAN countries that are south of Russia and toward the east of Russia, between Iran and China, and then between Russia and Europe, then Russia will have the ability to push its tanks and its battalions further into the border regions to the battlefront. So this, what it is a map. If we can picture the game of Risk, Doug, or a world map, if Russia gets these nations to join its union, then when World War III starts, instead of Russia being blamed as invading these countries like Hitler did, it will be welcomed to protect these countries. So Russia is doing this proactively, so it doesn't look evil, and that's what we see happening. The chess pieces are being rearranged before our eyes, and we're going to continue to see this develop into the future. Now, I mentioned some of those odd terms. I mentioned Novorossiya, Rand Corporation, Tavistock, Pacificom, Asia Pivot. Let's talk about what is going on with America's new foreign policy. Now, in 2011, the United States, or Obama, went to Australia, and he announced that America was going to start focusing more on the Asia-Pacific region of the world. And he said that Pacific Command is going to maneuver military assets that were in Central Command of the Middle East towards Pacific Command. So their goal is by 2020, or Obama's goal is by 2020, to have 60% of all the United States military assets in Pacific Command. Now, Doug, one of the questions I have is wow, or the statements I have is wow, and then why? Why is 60% of America's military resources going to be placed in Pacific Command? Well, I submit this to you is it's to get ready for the war with North Korea and China. Now, in order for America to do this, they have to acquire new bases or build new bases, and then that's exactly what's going on. In South Korea, America is spending $10 billion on a new base so that all their planes can have a place to take off to fight China. Also, Japan is allowing the United States to build a new base. And according to a report that I just read, I'll place the link after the program is up, Japan gave America some land. They shaved off the top of one of their mountains and took all of the dirt to build ports and to extend the sea area and to recover some of the land so that America can have a base that can park their ships and their destroyers and their warships, et cetera, and also have landing strips. Now, during World War II, Doug, the student of war, we know that in the Pacific theater, the United States needed islands to build airstrips so that they could refuel and land our planes and have base so that we could regroup, et cetera, in the war against Japan. It was very important to get to have bases closer to Japan so that we could win the war against Japan. That is happening right now proactively, ladies and gentlemen. We have two multi-billion-dollar bases being built to prepare for the Pacific theater against China and North Korea. Now, Doug, this is not being promoted and talked about, but Obama stated it. He said the Asia pivot is going to happen, and he didn't say why, but we know why. And the prophecies of how many servants of God have seen us at war with China. I have seen it happen, and the sad part of the glimpses that I have had, Doug, is not that we were winning a fight against China on Chinese ground and in Chinese territory. The glimpses that God gave me was that China arrived here and invaded America and was occupying America with Russian forces. So the opposite is going to occur. The end game of this is that God is going to allow America to suffer hardship of defeat, the defeat of war. Ladies and gentlemen, it is coming. The United States will be invaded. We'll see it happen. And we're going to be occupied by Russian and Chinese forces. That is coming, Doug. So I can't stress that enough. Dmitry Duduman saw it happen, and they didn't just come in peaceably and say, okay, see our shiny bullets and look at how big our guns are, give us your land. That's not what the servants of God have seen. Dmitry Duduman saw fire. America's going to burn. He saw the nukes go off. I have seen the nukes go off, Doug. I have seen the dogfights of Russian MiGs and Chinese MiGs flying over portions of the United States. I saw Red Dawn happen. I have seen the occupation. I've seen the registration. I've seen the American citizens who are required to report to their local schools as registration centers, and behind the registrar, the desk, were Chinese soldiers and Russian soldiers. I saw the lines form where American citizens had to wait in line outside the school, and they had to one by one register their families and their loved ones, and the Russian troops were poking and prodding and keeping everyone in a straight line. Doug, I saw this happen years ago. So this thing is coming, and it is not a fairy tale. It is not just some wishful thinking. It is not fear-mongering, ladies and gentlemen. It's reality. The judgment of God always eventually includes the sword judgment, which is a defeat in war. And those things are going to develop, Doug. So everything that I'm talking about, what we're going to see in 2015, I am not saying that the war will begin in 2015 and the occupation will occur in 2015. I'm saying the beginnings of the maneuvering will occur in the coming year. We're going to see the political maneuvering, the rhetoric, the waving of swords occur in the coming year. We're going to hear politicians talk about the benefits of war, why it needs to happen, and we're going to also continue seeing the demonizing of these supposed enemies of ours, Putin, Russia, China, North Korea, etc. It's already started with the movie Interview, Doug. It's happening before our eyes.
That's exactly right, and we, it's a conditioning process of the American public, the already dumbed down American public, and I'm sorry to use that term in a way, but I guess that there's no other way to phrase it. And of course, you've got the media that facilitates this official narrative. So this regime, and not just this regime, but others before it, and certainly others after, are going to be following the same game plan here. I mean, the Center for Foreign Policy talked about the pivot to Asia. I mean, oh boy, it boggles the mind. But your visions about a Red Dawn here in America, wow.
So, Doug, how do the warmongers accomplish this so perfectly? When we look into history's past, we see that over and over, the propaganda machine plays a huge, huge role in the development of nationalism and getting the people to foment at the mouth and desire and salivate over fighting and killing other people of the world. Well, one of the ways that it occurs is to separate the identity, to place a wedge between us and them, to divide, to reduce the enemy as not being human. And in the next hour, we're going to talk about the propaganda campaign that is happening right now and the new programs that the military has in development right now. This is the part that's going to be disturbing as I share it. When Nazi Germany was doing its evil thing during World War II, Nazi soldiers were under a spell. They were taught to separate humanity from the people they were mistreating, and they saw the people in concentration camps as fodder. They didn't consider them human. We know that now in history. Doug, the American military is bringing those types of brainwashing into future war games and developments that are going to be coming, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next hour. It has to do with phase zero shaping and cognitive development and brainwashing of our soldiers. That thing is coming, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Okay, Nathan, and I wanted to ask you this. I don't know if this is anything that you came across or were shown, but what I've been looking at and what I've been seeing is the hacking. I think Wired magazine called 2015 the year of the hack. We see what happened with Sony, and there's a new movie out about some kind of hacking into a nuclear facility that was going to cause some mass damage. I forget the name of this upcoming movie, but we're told that, through like they did with North Korea, you can have Part A or Company A hack Company B and blame it on Company C, even make it look like Company C was the one pulling off the hack. And if we can, on the other side, get your opinion on how this could play a role into getting us into war, not only getting us into war, but much other things such as hacking medical records, bank accounts, and what they would do from, we'll say, a mass banking hack or pension hack, what their actions might be, who they'd blame it on. And this speaks to, this goes towards terrorism. It's just like terrorism. You had an enemy, you couldn't point your finger on it, but you gave it a name, an overall name, and that let our country go to war almost indiscriminately against anybody they said was harboring terrorists. With that, we'll take our top of the hour break. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, December 29th, 2014. Our special guest, Mr. Nathan Leal. His website is watchmanscry.com. You can go to his website, and on the right-hand side is the show notes for the show tonight, what we're talking about. He's put together a very an article here pertaining to everything we're covering tonight. So watchmanscry.com. On the right-hand side, under the Hagmann and Hagmann show tonight, is show notes. Pull that up if you haven't yet or joining us late. We'll be right back after.
Some people can't handle the truth, therefore they say fear porn, doom porn, sell your whatever. We don't have anything to sell, really. So anyway, folks, you're listening to a very special broadcast of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with our special guest, Nathan Leal. Watchman's Cry, that's his website. It's linked off of HagmannandHagmann.com on the right-hand side, also under our Circle of Trust, Watchman's Cry. Nathan, I got an email real quick here before we move on. Going to kind of take you just a tad off of the center here. Email from Mary wants to know specifically your take on whether we will see elections, the next presidential elections. Will there be? And based on your prayerful consideration, is it possible we might not see another presidential election?
Boy, a loaded question that is fair. When I had a dream several years ago, Doug, I don't know if you remember me mentioning there were some elements of this dream that I didn't want to share openly. And one of the reasons was because I didn't want to be accused of anything, wrongdoing.
Yep.
Okay. And this dream has to do with going back. It was a combination of four dreams. The first one was when the Patriots ambushed police officers. The police officers were going to show up in their MRAPs, and the Patriots were hiding in the rooftops. And let me qualify that term. Some individuals who appeared, they were extremists because regular Patriots wouldn't do that. So they were extremists, let me say that, who ambushed them and were on the second floor roofs waiting for the SWAT team. And when the SWAT team exited their MRAPs, the extremists shot them and ambushed them and killed all of them with weapons. And then after that dream was over, of course, I started screaming. I shared that over a year ago, I believe. I started screaming, and then I saw the uprising began where regular citizens, it was us versus them, versus the coming revolution.
Right.
The insiders, Homeland Security, whoever it might be, it moved to that, and then the next one had the derailed trains, and that was way back then. We saw the trains derail. And then the fourth one was I was in Air Force One as a Secret Service agent, and there were people on the tarmac holding fire torches and like sticks. They didn't have weapons, so did the Second Amendment go away? I don't know, but they did not have arms, regular guns. They just had sticks, and they were outside of Air Force One protesting, and they wanted to harm the president. And I was one of the Secret Service agents, and within the Air Force One, other Secret Service agents wanted to also harm the president. It was a coup in motion, and I was standing between the president and the Secret Service agents. And that's as far as I have shared. I said there's something else that I really don't feel comfortable sharing.
Right.
And
okay.
have I told you what it
Fair
is?
enough.
But have I told you off the air?
To answer that question, you indicated what it was, but I'm not going to go there just to protect your. We'll just leave
better
it.
Not. I don't know. At this point, it's better not. So,
yeah.
Based on what I saw, I think that there's a chance that we will have an election and another president. So I'll leave it at that.
Yay, Jeb. All right. That's fair enough. And Mary, thank you for the question. And this is a little easier, and then I'll let you can continue. This is a little easier, and it goes back to last hour. We know that Russia and the Soviet Union specifically, they were a creation of the Illuminati, and specifically the Rockefellers. If you go back to the Bolshevik Revolution, and folks, you got to know history. You really do. You got to know real history, not the official narratives of the stories, the baloney that's taught. But to what degree do you think, Nathan, that some people in the creation of the next war are serious players, like Putin, Clinton's, Bush's? Or are they serious players? I mean, are they out for blood, or are they simply playing their known parts in this theater of the absurd? I mean, is this an illusion in part, shall we say, or because we know that what's his face? That sounded professional. Had a vacation home right after, or whether it was a vacation home right after the Soviets fell. I'm trying to think of the name. Was it Rockefeller or anyway? So I mean, is this illusion? Is this a depopulation situation where the power brokers know, look, we're just going to have to pretend this is going to? I mean, it kind of like a professional wrestling match. Is that what we're seeing here between Russia and the United States? Ultimately, there's one winner.
I believe, Doug, that we have to always resort to the scriptures and the multidimensional outlook of this and interpretation of this to have full 100% understanding. We have to include the spiritual, and when we do that, then things make more sense, because the spiritual reveals that the human condition requires or involves a spiritual battle where at times even well-meaning people become deceived, and they believe what they believe, but it's deception. So it's a spiritual deception that's going on right now in the New World Order, because the men's hearts did not love the truth, so God will then allow them to be deceived. And when we look at the book of Revelation, it says the kings of the earth will give their authority over to the beast. The beast is powered by the dragon, Satan. So it's a spell that these people are under. They believe that what they're doing has a motive that is good. Of course, it's situational ethics, but for the greater good, and whatever they're told in that smoke-filled room when they all have their cigars and they're offered the world on a platter, whatever promise they're given, it's a promise that deceives them. I don't think that heads are brought out and dead babies are brought out and they say, hey, look, we can just be totally devil incarnate if we carry out our plan. That's not how Satan works. Satan works with deception. He offers reward. He appeals to the flesh with pleasure, with riches, with power. So these people that really believe in this thing are deceived, and the ones that are truly deceived are also possessed by spiritual entities and beings who are driving, who are at the steering wheel of their mind and their motives and their thought pattern and the way they carry their plans out. So I remember someone had said a long time ago, and this was with Bill Clinton. It might have been with Bill Clinton or George Bush 1. It was a gentleman on Coast to Coast. I believe it was one of those Catholic priests. I don't remember his name, but he passed away since then. He was on Coast to Coast, and he said
Malachi Martin.
Yes, Malachi Martin. He said that Papa Bush is perfectly possessed. Do you remember him saying that?
Very well, yes.
And that's what it is. So it's deception. And if that is an example to explain it, or if that's the best I can do, Doug, because I have to resort to the spiritual explanation, because that's the one that is actually the truth.
Exactly, and you did a fine job with that, Jeff. Hopefully that it certainly answers a lot for me and Jeff B. That's a great question from Nathan. God bless you for that, Nathan. And you're exactly right. In fact, that applies to everything that you've said and will say tonight. You've got to look at that through that prism of biblical, spiritual, divine influence to understand really how deep this really goes. So go ahead, sir. Continue.
Okay, now let's talk about the brainwashing campaign and the brainwashing methods that our U.S. military is going to use to accomplish this plan. Now, since we have been talking about deception, that's exactly the tool that Satan always uses, deception. And, Doug, when we go back several years when I spoke about the forces of Babylon invading America during the inauguration of version 2.0 Obama presidency, and the demonic spirit Nergal came through the gates of America, who is an entity who abides in the underworld, and we went into that. You remember that? And some of the listeners
very much.
May remember that. That was a whole other program. But when Obama did his second inauguration, a spiritual thing took place, and a shift happened in America where demonic entities came through the gateways of the underworld and entered the White House. And back then, Doug, we talked about what these entities were going to do. And Nergal was one of the chief players of this thing, and Nergal is an entity that was worshipped in ancient Babylon. He does exist, and I believe, without a shadow of a doubt, that this creature is influencing the White House. I wouldn't be surprised if he actually uses some of the individuals in the cabinet, including Obama, at times to be his Holiday Inn. So he envelops them, that they become possessed at times. And I'll just say that the members of, because a normal, rational, righteous person who feared God would not pass some of these insane, bizarre laws that Obama passes. So there are demonic elements involved, and Nergal is one of them. Well, if you look at the resume of Nergal, this demonic prince, he is the chief of Hell's secret police. He is a wizard and a schemer of bringing in police-state tactics in a government. So all throughout time, he has been involved in empires that have come and gone that seem to regularly follow the same script, Doug. When we look at it and break it down, all of the empires that have come who were dictatorships had their stool pigeons. They had the fear, the secret police, whether it was even using spears. They had the total control and a noose over the society. And the reason they were able to do it in such a perfect manner is because they had the genius of evil helping them. So when we talked about this 2 years ago, that Nergal was going to come into the United States, we also said this, and Doug, this is on record. The United States is going to continue to go into the down the road toward a police state, and we're going to see great evil come in where the noose is going to be tightened over freedom, and we're going to see some bizarre mandates pass that are going to prove that America is under the control of an evil watch. That's happening right now. So for this thing to continue, we can expect the same sort of scheme to be taking place, which includes deception. These demonic creatures are very good at deception, and deception requires that people are placed in a spell, that people believe a lie, that they find themselves anesthetized in a coma, that there's a general mood of spiritual thickness, that it's a fog of darkness and deception that comes over a land so that the people can fall for it. Well, when we look at the future of America, Obama has been purging the righteous ones in the military. He's been purging the top brass who have scruples, who fear God, who have principles, who understand right versus wrong, who understand that there's a battle of good versus evil, and who understand that they do not want to be part of any sort of regime that has evil as its motive. and Obama has filtered them out. And so what we have with the leftovers are individuals who will be the yes men, the stormtroopers, who will find themselves under a spell, who will allow themselves to be Manchurian brainwashed robots to do the will of the New World Order under the auspices of the U.S. military. This is the part that gets spooky, Doug, because when we look at how our U.S. military has been on the decline with morality and evils coming in, the gay thing, the transvestite thing, just all this nonsense that has made America's army that used to be righteous men fighting for righteousness as liberators of World War II into a bunch of sissies, cross-dressing. What are they, Doug? I don't know, but they're the creation of this social engineering that is an embarrassment to righteousness and is fit for failure, and God's going to make sure they fail. So, how are they going to do it? The deception will come, and in order for this to be successful, deception has to be legitimized, and it has to come from the very top. So, the United States military has come up with some new programs, and if you can go to my notes page, Doug, and refresh it during the break, I added several links.
I see that. Yeah, folks, go to watchmanscry.com or hagmanhagmann.com, click on the link to Watchman's Cry, go to the notes page, and while you're there, refresh the page if you've been on it for a while, and look at that. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, let's start with the NDAA bill that was just passed.
Okay. Number 4 on the list.
Okay, the NDAA is an annual budget measure that Congress passes to fund the military, and of course, as we all know, they funded it, and everything they wanted, they were given. If you click on that link to the NDAA, there are some bizarre ingredients in that bill. So if you click on it, it takes a while to load. But if you can scroll down to, I don't know how yours shows it, but on page 21, well, I'm sorry, on page 572, if you can go there.
This, by the way, folks, is a 1,648-page document. It's in PDF format. And you said, I'm sorry, what page number?
Well, it's section 1075.
Section 1075.
Yeah, so it's down about a third of the way. Section 1075, Pilot Program for Human Terrain System. So, and if the listeners don't have a chance to do that, I can, after the show's over, I'll place a quote there, or they can do it later. But the latest military budget includes this little blurb here, and it's not very big. It doesn't really explain what it is, but it says, let me just read it, pilot program required. The Secretary of the Army may carry out a pilot program under which the Secretary utilizes human terrain system assets in the United States Pacific Command area of responsibility to support Phase 0 shaping operations and the theater security cooperation plans of the Commander of the United States Pacific Command. Wow, Doug, what a mouthful. What in the world does that mean? Right? By the way, have you found it? It's there.
Yeah, I'm looking for that specific entry. I have not found it on the page numbers on the top. Haven't found it. If
your browser has a find tool, you can click the tools and click find. You just type in Phase 0 or Section 1075, and it'll bring it up. But anyway, after the show's over, I'll put an easier quote to find it. But let's talk about this Phase 0 shaping program. What in the world does that mean? What is that? Well, for those that are familiar with military terminology, and by the way, Doug, it's really a chore to try to make sense of a lot of this legal speak, and I believe it's done on purpose so that the average citizen that's been Common Core down to his bones will not be able to interpret it and understand it and comprehend it. But phase in the military, there traditionally have been 5 phases of a theater engagement. and I have it printed up right here. Phase 1 is to deter the enemy. It focuses on deterring specific opponents by demonstrating capability and resolve. It's when the maneuvering first takes place. Hey, we're getting ready for war. You better be afraid of all of our tanks that are lining up for battle. So this is your last chance to go home. Phase 1. Phase 2, hostilities commence. War starts. Combat power is applied. So that's when the war starts. Phase 3, dominate the enemy, and this is where the destruction of the enemy is used to break the will of the enemy and to break the will of organized resistance. It's winning the battle, basically. Phase 4 is stabilizing the environment, and this includes rebuilding all the broken bridges and buildings and glass all over the ground. It's the no-bid contracts that Halliburton is awarded. It's the defense contractors that go in there to be the police and the mercenaries, etc. That's the fun phase, Doug, where people get rich off the backs of the American taxpayer. That's phase 4.
Sure.
And then phase 5 is enable civil authority, or placing, I'm paraphrasing, replacing the ex-government with the puppet government of the United States. That's phase 5. So to legitimize civil authorities so that they can self-police them, the country. So that's 5 phases. Well, the U.S. military decided that they didn't have a place for the preliminary portions of warfare that the United States and the CIA, MI6 has become genius at, and where we see, actually it's in play right now in the Ukraine. We saw it in Afghanistan, in Iraq, where CIA assets and spies go in first and they map the land and they try to shape the environment and get familiar with the enemy before the equipment arrives. So they needed a place to stick this added part of the plan, so they went backwards. Instead of adding to the phases and changing the numbers, they went backwards and they called it phase 0. So that's what it is. So phase 0, what is this? Well, and this is the part that some people, Doug, if they read the wrong news report, will say, well, I don't see the problem. That sounds smart. It sounds like it's saving money, or it sounds like it will save lives, etc. But basically, this is what it is. It involves, and I'm going to read several definitions I have here, and then I'm going to paraphrase. But it involves joint interagency and multinational activities that are conducted on an ongoing routine basis to assure or solidify friendly relationships and alliances and to deter potential adversaries. Now, that, of course, said nothing, but that's the official definition. So I kept on looking, and I said, well, that sounds weird. Maybe someone else can paraphrase, and I found another one, and it said joint and multinational operations that are part of routine military activities where outside help will come in to solidify friendships with friends and allies. That still didn't say what it meant. So I kept digging because in the NDAA, it said that a pilot program is going to be carried out that utilizes human terrain systems. So this is what I found out, Doug. Basically, phase 0 program, and ladies and gentlemen, if you're taking notes or if you want to research this yourself, or if you already know what it happens to be, then you can email Doug and I, and we would be happy to add it to our attempt to define this thing. But I believe it's being purposely ambiguous so that the soldiers will think it's a good thing. But here's what it is, Doug. What it does is it requires the use of educated PhDs who are experts and who have studied anthropology, which is the study of man in different regions of the world, different races, different ethnicities. And these anthropologists are brought in and embedded with the military, or in the future they'll do this. And these anthropologists, their job when the military, of course, occupies the land, or when they're coming in for the preliminary portions of war, these PhDs will embed themselves or immerse themselves into the nation that's being conquered or attacked or is about to be attacked, and essentially they become spies. And their job is to go in and here, this is from their words, to map the human terrain of where they're about to attack. So humans, the civilian citizenry of the area that the United States is about to engage are not called civilians. They're no longer referred to as people or men, women, and children. They are now called human terrain or human domain. Now, right there, Doug, should raise a red flag because what it does is it creates a psychological separation for the soldiers, for our military, to no longer consider and refer to the civilians as civilians. Now they're called human domain or human terrain. It takes the human element out of it, and this is exactly the same thing that Nazi Germany did with their soldiers. They erased the human part of the equation. Now, also, you can, if you want to research this, I'm going to put a lot of links to this up, Doug. But the thing that's really disturbing about this strategy is that the soldiers are going to be, and let me just say it, if you're involved in the U.S. military, you're going to be brainwashed to minimize the humanity of the people that you're going to be around. Now, they try to whitewash it and say it's to build a bridge with the culture so that we understand their spiritual and religious beliefs so that we don't step on their toes. See, that's the whitewashing way of doing it, but as I have been examining the documents, that's not the truth of what we're looking at. It is to infiltrate, to train our U.S. military to infiltrate whatever country they happen to be in. Now, they have done some test runs of this in Afghanistan, and already in the past year or two, several of the quote-unquote human terrain experts have been killed, and several of the human terrain experts have found themselves taking part in anti-Geneva Convention war crimes. They have assassinated and executed some of the nationals and people. So it's not foolproof, but when we look at the human terrain element, they are told that they are supposed to go in and find out who the ringleaders are, find out who the followers are, the accomplices in the areas that they're going in. Now, from the intelligence point of view, if you were to consider, well, from the military intelligence point of view, that's actually smart, Nathan. We need to know which house to put a bullseye in and paint so that we can shoot a missile into it. So that's good for us. And that's true at some point. If we were to interpret this and limit it to the war, for example, war against ISIS, let's say, Doug, most Americans will say, yeah, that's good. Let's find them. When they're at the waiting, get rid of them and assassinate them. And when we filter this through the filter of situational ethics, it's easy to paint good things with this strategy. However, the negative part of this is the big picture. And what it does is first of all, the new generation of our military is recruiting a dumbed-down part of the population, young people, millennials who are unemployed, who have been public school educated, who have not thought to think for themselves, who do not understand the Constitution, who were not around during freedom, during the Reagan era, et cetera, Doug. The new generation of our military are dumbed-down robots. And I have spoken several times to fellow remnant believers, Christians, people who are awake, who are in the military, who have said this to me. They've told me that the new breed of soldiers that's coming in scares them because they don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about human life. They just want to party, and they're bloodthirsty. They think it's a video game. So that part right there is very spooky. Now, the other part of this program is the big question that I have is the wording of this new bill, because it's over $100 million that has been given for this pilot program to be given to Pacific Command. The Pacific Command region includes areas of North Korea and China and basically the future of war that's coming. So what this is saying is there's a pilot program to place and embed intelligence assets into the nations that fall under Pacific Command, which is China and North Korea, et cetera, to prepare for the coming war. That right there raises a red flag because it's pinpointing the area of the future theater, Doug. So that right there is
very much
disheartening.
Yep.
Okay, the other thing that's also very disheartening is this. Now, if you are at my link, on the link it says number 3, human terrain shaping. I have a link there, and if you can click that, Newsweek did an article last year about this new program, human terrain shaping, and it talks about, and it's a very lengthy article, and please don't get sidetracked to try to read the whole thing, but you can read it after the show is over, but it talks about the requirements of this new program, and the thing that, what they actually did in this report, Doug, is they let the cat out of the bag. They admitted the real reason for human terrain shaping or phase 0 shaping, and it is this. It's to prepare the U.S. military to fight U.S. citizens. And I'll go out on a limb and say that's what this is for. Because in the past, when our soldiers were asked, would you fire upon U.S. citizens? They, of course, are you kidding? Would you do that? Soldiers of the past said, no way. That's where I draw the line.
Right.
They play these mind games with the soldiers. Well, what if the bad guy's holding the suitcase nuke and he's holding your mom in front of him? Would you shoot through your mom to kill him so you can save the country? They place these situational ethic type questions with our soldiers in the past, and they continue to do it. But to also lower the humanity of regular citizens, the propaganda campaign must, and the Rand Corporation, by the way, is behind this, and so is Tavistock. They must minimize the value of the American population. Now, when we look back at the last several weeks, Doug, let me just pause for a moment. This is already public information. And let me ask this question. How many different cities has the U.S. military been practicing urban warfare in across the country?
Well, you got Los Angeles, you got the greater Los Angeles,
Miami,
Dallas,
Chicago, Dallas. That's just to name a few off the top of my head, so I'm sure there's at least twice that many.
Maybe 10?
Right.
What's the number?
Okay, now, Doug, I want to ask, do you have that link open? The one about humans? The Newsweek article?
Newsweek is blocking me, so no.
You don't? Joe, can you open it? Does Joe have it?
Maybe not.
Let me
see.
go here.
I'm not sure if you can open it from our IP address. I think we're on the same IP.
Okay, well, when you have a chance...
No, there is a limit to the number of articles you can open without subscribing, and I think we've reached that. So.
Okay, well, let me go ahead and read for the listening audience, and if they have it in front of them, listeners, if you can scroll down the article, there's a photograph of a soldier with a Chinook behind him, and then there's a picture of a soldier talking to Afghans, and then you keep scrolling down, and then it says in the third paragraph below that picture of the soldier talking to Afghans, it says in February 2009. When you have a chance, Doug, if you can read this from another computer, this proves what this program is about. It's to prepare the U.S. military to get rid of posse comitatus against the U.S. citizens. Now, in the coming war that is in our future, we will see theaters of war against Russia and China and also against the American people. 3 areas. Let me just read what it says right here. In February 2009, this is what the reporter said, I flew to Leavenworth, Kansas. By the way, Leavenworth is where they train these human terrain experts to learn how the human terrain system prepared field team members for deployment to a war zone. So he goes on to say how they do it and how there's also a period of several weeks known as immersion when trainees bound for Afghanistan spent time at the University of Nebraska in Omaha studying the language in Afghanistan. It goes on, the next paragraph. Well, let me jump down to the one after that. Human terrain system training took place in the basement of a brick mini mall in downtown Leavenworth called The Landing. So these are the doctors and the experts that are going to have high influence with our soldiers, Doug. And they are trained at this facility in Leavenworth. It's an old federal prison, and the sprawling Army garrison that anchor the town lie about a mile to the northwest. Fort Leavenworth is home to mid-career master's programs for officers. It's where the Army contemplates its past and tries to get ahead of its future. Okay. Next paragraph. The program's administrators told me that the most interesting part of the training would be the final week when proto human terrain members took part in a practical exercise to test what they have learned. Here it is, Doug. This proves what it's for. The exercise was called Weston Reserve, named for the town of Weston, Missouri, near Leavenworth, where some of it took place. The Human Terrain Systems press handler, former Army intelligence officer Lieutenant George Mace, a veteran of 1st Terrain Team to be deployed in Iraq, described Weston Resolve to me as a practicum in doing ethnography in any kind of village. So they used this template to train their people. The exercise was an elaborate game that began with the imagined secession from the United States of a big swath of territory between the Dakotas and Missouri. In keeping with this fictional turn of events, separatist groups and criminal elements, you see, Doug, if you no longer want to follow the Obama doctrine and if people decide to secede, now you're a criminal and a separatist. Separatist groups and criminal elements were supposedly making trouble in eastern Kansas, burglarizing a pharmacy, among other misdeeds. The U.S. government feared that crime syndicates and terrorists would commandeer this unstable new quadrant of the heartland. So the patriots who decided to secede in this report, Doug, are called crime syndicates and terrorists. U.S. citizens who believe in the Constitution are called terrorists and crime syndicates. Interesting.
They were just reinforcing the non-federal aspect of things. So we're all, anyone who believes in the Bill of Rights, Constitution, personal freedom, religious freedom, anything like that, we are obviously. This is, to me, this is an attempt to consolidate the definitions and to better hone the definitions so everyone's clear that if you've got a Bible and a gun, you're the enemy. That's what this says to me.
And
whether you're a soldier,
Doug?
Whether you're a soldier or a cop or a nurse or a doctor or a psychologist or a professor, you got a Bible, you got a gun, you're in trouble. Go ahead, sir.
It goes on. It says the U.S. government feared that crime syndicates and terrorists would commandeer this new quadrant of the heartland for their own ends. And they sought to bring an end to the revolt and bring it under control. So the human terrain trainee's job was to figure out, as unobtrusively as possible, what kind of people lived among this border and gather information about their customs, their values, and their beliefs. So, in other words, Doug, they are embedding CIA-type assets of an intelligence gathering into the Army, and this is going to span not just the Army; it's going to be in all of them. But they are adding these assets to go in and find out, and they call it mapping, the way that they will find the information, and they have computer programs where they would be able to add to a database all of the information to be given to all government agencies to understand and know who the ringleaders are in the future. So, in essence, Doug, let's look at this. The U.S. military is going to add the assets of intelligence gathering as part of the Army, the Marines, etc., which kind of has a eerie similarity to the Nazis, because the Nazis had their Stasi group of their military, right? Secret police, who were great at information gathering, and that this is a pilot program to add that to the military. And Doug, if this doesn't tell us that how late the hour is with the police state that's coming and how the U.S. military is eventually going to turn on its citizens, then people are not awake, because this is now an official program that has been endorsed by Congress. So
yeah, I wonder how many people actually read the 1,650-page bill. But regardless of that, the article that you referenced goes back to August of 2013. This has been in progress for now the last year plus. So bottom line here is, the infrastructure that is going to be used to identify people like you, Nathan, like me, like some of those listeners out there. It's already in place or fixing to be in place. I noticed several on the NDAA thing here, several deadlines of September of 2016, and I mean, so everything seems to be really ratcheting up in terms of time. And yes, you're correct. I mean, the Gestapo from Nazi Germany, oh my goodness, this is just sickening. And so, Nathan, would it be fair then to say, as we look at the macro on what this regime, this renegade in chief, has done, and the people around him, firing generals and wiping out the many within the ranks, the flag corps of the army, and debasing the military as they debase our dollars. This is all part of this plan, isn't it? I mean, now it makes sense, doesn't it? Wow.
Indeed it does. And in order for them to be successful, though, Doug, they have to change the thinking with the American public and with the military and with the local police, stateside. And we already see that happening. It's like, in fact, we just mentioned that. Doesn't it seem like the police that are across this country, yes, they're still good ones. I'm sure that the Oath Keepers are there, but it's like a spell has been placed over the police because over and over, Doug, I find hundreds and hundreds of stories on brutality and death and executions that the police are doing with innocent citizens, unarmed citizens, that is mind-boggling. That in the days of Rodney King was very rare, and now it's an everyday occurrence. What is going on? And I just have to conclude this. It's a spiritual thing. It's darkness coming over the land where there is a militarization under the spell of these creepy, demonic underworld spirits that are coming in. And unless an officer of the law is a Christian and respects the principles of God and the Constitution and right and wrong, they will find themselves under the spell themselves. It will be us versus them mentality.
Yeah, or completely out of the whatever organization that they belong to because they just cannot coexist being a real Christian. And folks, this is why we present the news with a biblical, through the prism of biblical prophecy because of this very nature. Under a spell indeed. Very well said, Nathan. I mean, under a spiritual, darkened, demonic, satanic spell by the spellmakers themselves, by the foundation laid by Kissinger and by Soros and by Brzezinski and others whose offspring they permeate the landscape of the media and the policy think tanks and everything. This is exactly what. This is fantastic. I mean, if people can't see this now, okay, the way you laid this out, man, I'm telling you, this is, wow. Okay.
So how are they going to do it? Well, it's going to be a continuation using the tools that have been formulated by the demon-possessed doctors and mad scientists who dwell in those dungeons of the Rand Corporation or Tavistock or other brain trusts that believe in the New World Order. These individuals can actually verbalize the strategies and the schemes of how to brainwash the public in a collective manner. And one of the plans that I came across, and I'm going to place a link to it after the program's over, is a white paper that the United States Army Special Operations Command just published. It was published just a couple of months ago, and it's called Cognitive Joint Force Entry. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're taking notes, you can Google that and find it. But it goes along with the real strategy of phase zero shaping and the human terrain shaping. By the way, Doug, here's a piece of historical thought. When we look at the imperialistic empire building that occurred in the 17th century, in the 1800s with England and some of the other empires that have come and gone, when they would go into Africa or South America and defeat the natives and take over all their resources and make the natives their slaves, and we've seen that happen to banana republics over time, when they did that, the militaries of those eras often used anthropologists to embed themselves with the soldiers. So they would go into the jungles to learn how to understand and see the people as not human, but as cave dwellers, cavemen, primal beings who didn't deserve the same respect as the first world people. And that method of using anthropologists to separate humanity has always been used with imperialism. And we saw it with the UK, with Great Britain back then. So this is not a new thing, but since the U.S. military has decided to do that now, that shows how low we've come. And it shows that it's an us versus them. It's empire building. And may I dare say, Doug, it's desperation that is occurring through the petrodollar and the leaders of the IMF and the Western branch of the New World Order. They are desperate because they see the petrodollar is going to be dissolved. It's going to be done away with. And OPEC right now, by the way, is struggling. I've seen articles saying that it's already broken. I don't see that as in finality, but it's in trouble because Iran saying, how long are we going to put up with this to stay a member of OPEC?
That's right.
So all these things are shaping up, and as I was mentioning, the white paper, Cognitive Joint Force Entry. Joe, I believe you had mentioned earlier about the hacking war or the cyber war that they're going to use in the future. This white paper admits that in order to conquer the new terrain and the country that they're going in, it's going to take a control and an understanding and the use of cognitive brainwashing. I'm paraphrasing, but right here it says Cognitive Joint Force Entry is a proactive, human domain-centered strategy that synchronizes and employs all components of the global information environment. So right there, that's the computer, the internet, to predispose populations of a foreign country or countries. Now, this is what it's for. To predispose them to favorably view U.S. activities or operations. It reflects campaigning to shape and win the people to U.S. operations and activities. So, in a nutshell, that's brainwashing.
Well, yeah, and in a perfect world, if America was the bastion of morality and of Christianity and of everything good and puppy dogs and rainbows, I get that. I understand that. But what you've got is this perversion of not just morality, but of all things godlike, and everything has been counterfeited into this system of the Antichrist, which ultimately is what we're talking about. I mean, the cutting right down to the bottom line here is America is being used as, and Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, as the new Atlantis or the reformulated Babylon, the old world order into the new world order, the phoenix coming out of the ashes after, of course, it's, at some point in time, but to create this oppressive, communistic-based, satanic-based, Luciferian-based new world order under which all men, especially having the seed of Adam, will be subjugated to a beast-like system. I mean, that's the bottom line here. And these are the mechanics and how we're getting there. And to understand the mechanics is to understand how we could possibly throw the monkey wrench into the mix, perhaps, right?
And, Doug, over the years, we have seen the Hollywood productions of the body snatcher type movies or The Fog or those The They Live type movies where people are placed under a spell and it's where the population is divided and not many know. Most do not know that they're under a spell except for a few that are awake. And that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what your program does. That's what your calling does, is to awaken people, and that's what this ministry, Watchman's Cry, attempts to do. And that's, in the last few minutes, let me just sum up this. Listeners, folks, the warning is simple. This is what I want to say. The warning is to awaken those who are sleeping so that they can awaken from spiritual hibernation into spiritual life, because the rest of the world is in hibernation. And they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand. And they're going to turn on Christians. They're going to turn on the remnant. It's going to be a bloodbath of us versus them. So we need to awaken and cover ourselves with as much knowledge and wisdom and favor with God as we can. I share these words so that those who are away from God can return. Doug, that's the other challenge. And this is what the truth is. This is the truth. And here's something else to think about. Those who are living a life away from God, folks, if you're not allied with God right now in all things, then you're running the risk of being the enemy of God. Let's just put it out on the table. And Isaiah 1:24 says, the Lord of hosts, the mighty one of Israel, states this. Isaiah 1:24, God says, I will rid myself of my adversaries and take vengeance on my enemies. So, ladies and gentlemen, in this audience, please do not be the hard-headed ones that are enemies from God. If you're away from God, you don't want this happening to you. You don't want that verse that I just read to reflect on you, where God says, I will rid the world of my adversaries. We do not want that. This is not a game. It's not a matter of opinion. It's not worth a foolish gamble. If you want to be ready for what's coming, step one is to make sure that you're not God's enemy or adversary, meaning get your house in order. And sadly, Doug, the sad thing is many people are not going to do it. And there's a lot of reasons they won't. They weren't ready. They weren't sure they believed what Nathan had to say. There's too much to give up. They were too busy, etc. They were having too much fun. But, folks, excuses are not going to save us, nor will they benefit your family, your loved ones, your children, and your spouse. It is our job right now, Doug, to do what we can to find ourselves under Psalms 91. Psalms 91, that is the calling, and that's what the challenge is. Because the sad part of the matter is, Doug, is that we will see the statistic in the aftermath. There's going to be a count, a body count. A lot of people are going to die in the war that's coming. And
there are a lot of Christians dying right now. You know, Nathan, sorry for interrupting, but, you know, we're looking at a mass execution of all Christians, of people, children who refuse to subjugate themselves to the Islamic rule, for example, or those who simply believe in Jesus Christ are being beheaded, killed, shot, executed. And a lot of this is coming right from the belly of the beast here in America, known as the Obama-Clinton/Kerry State Department. But I digress. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I just wanted to close out the last few minutes with the challenge, Doug, that, as we were saying, a lot of people aren't going to make it, and those that do make it will not make it because of chance. They will not make it because they were lucky and they rolled the dice, or they were smarter than everybody else. The only way that people are going to make it is because they had the covering of God and the shelter of God. And those that do make it are going to be a part of the tiny, minute, small remnant. And we have seen this over and over in history. We've seen it in biblical history, that most people don't make it for one simple reason, because their heart is hard and of stubbornness. That's it. So for the listening audience, I just want to say it doesn't have to be this way. Listener, if you're out there, if you're away from God, I want to see everyone make it, Doug. I want to see the listeners make it. I want to see their family members make it. So let's rise up. Listener, I want to leave you with this. Rise up above the mess that you have. Be determined, be decisive, and watch what God will do in your life. Now, Doug, some people oftentimes say, Nathan, when he comes on the show, he shoves Jesus down your throat. He shoves God down your throat. But where else is there to go, ladies and gentlemen? There's nowhere else to go. Our hope is in God. So I want to leave that with the listeners, that we need to be awakened and obtain the power of God, the power of the Spirit, to escape the jaws of death and flee from the evil that is coming. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to leave that with you. God, His mercy is new every morning. He's waiting for every one of you to call out to him. He's waiting to help you, to restore you, to strengthen you. He is there. We serve a powerful God, and he is in control of all this. He knows it's happening, so let's be allied with him. And with that,
Amen, brother.
I'll give it to you, Doug.
Well, Nathan, I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, you've given folks. You're going to have to go back and listen to this again, and definitely, if you haven't taken notes, do so or take more notes, because what Nathan has given us is really an up-to-date, and I mean up-to-date, factual accounting of where we are today with respect to the lateness of the hour. And Nathan, you've done a fantastic job with your research. I mean, I got to tell you, in our conversations off air, on air, always a pleasure and always informative, folks. And by the way, page 567 of that PDF file is section 1075. Talks about what we referenced earlier. But Nathan, we're up against the close of the program. I just want to say, man, you outdid yourself tonight. I mean, really outdid yourself. I got to tell you. Wow, dead on, man. And you covered a lot of ground and did it methodically, and I just want to say thank you for doing so, buddy. Appreciate that.
Thank you, gentlemen, for having me.
All right, well, give your wife a big hug for us and tell her thanks for sharing you, your kids as well, and we wish you the best, and we're praying for you, your family, your health, your protection, and do join us again, please.
Thank
Anytime.
you, gentlemen. Thank you.
All right. God bless her.
All right,
folks, that'll do it for us tonight, man.
Great show. Tomorrow,
yeah,
Stan Dale will be live with us. He was not on last week as he had family in town.
We better double check.
Right. I was planning on calling him tomorrow or emailing him in the morning. But if I remember right, let me run to his website real quick and just check. I believe he did have it up on the website to be on tomorrow.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Sounds
great.
I hope he's ready to go. We got a lot of stuff to talk about with him. There's reports of some booms and different things going on with the Earth and the atmosphere, and we definitely need his opinion on it. Until tomorrow, 8 p.m. here. God bless, stay safe, and we'll see you then. Bye.